Taiki has had a crush for years on a senior who turns out to be the daughter of his mother's best friend, and now they're going to live together. Just starting high school, Taiki is thrilled about cohabiting with his crush. Every day, Taiki runs to school early just to see her, but as soon as he enters the gym, a basketball hits him. The senior, Chinatsu, rushes over and gently touches the bruise on his forehead, apologizing with a pack of snacks. Taiki is so smitten he'd give his heart to her if he could. Their school, a combined junior and senior high specializing in sports, is where Taiki practices badminton, always striving to be the first on the court. However, Chinatsu from the girls' basketball team always beats him there. Taiki admires the hardworking and charming Chinatsu and dreams of marrying her someday. His friend Kyo teases him, pointing out that Chinatsu is set to be the new face of the basketball team, admired not only for her skills, but also her charisma and star quality. At the school, every sports club has its territory. Taiki's badminton skills are just average, and he's the newest on the team. He only gets to speak to Chinatsu during morning practice, but remains optimistic. His mom used to be on the school's basketball team, and he believes that without trying, there's no chance of winning. Kyo, feeling sorry for him, advises him to at least make an effort to get Chinatsu to remember his name or get her contact info. When Taiki's friend Hina comes over, they start joking around. Seeing Taiki troubled, Hina eagerly offers advice when he asks what can make a girl happy. Her immediate response: appear confident and reliable, and most importantly, have a fit body. Taiki regrets asking Hina, realizing her advice is a bit too unique. Suddenly he saw the senior ahead of him, softened by the sunset light. She just lightly flipped her hair and captured Taiki's heart. He mustered the courage to speak to her, but was unsure what to say. As she was engrossed in a book, Taiki wanted to ask what she was reading, but hesitated to interrupt her. Suddenly, Chinatsu sneezed. Taiki immediately took off his scarf. In a rush, he handed it to her and dug out a thermos from his bag, along with gloves and a hand warmer. The next second, he regretted acting so hastily. Chinatsu didn't mind at all and kept staring at Taiki, curious to see what else he would pull out. Taiki continued searching, making Chinatsu laugh. Then, it was Taiki's turn to sneeze. Chinatsu personally wrapped him in the scarf. In that moment, Taiki even thought of names for their future kids. Before leaving, she reminded him not to catch a cold and accurately called out his name. Taiki was surprised. Why did Chinatsu know his name? Then Chinatsu mentioned, "Your mom is really thoughtful." Taiki then noticed his mom had written his name on the scarf. Their first conversation was awkward, but Taiki didn't mind. He was happy she remembered his name, determined to keep trying. But after training, he saw Chinatsu talking to the basketball coach, interrupted by Hina. Hina noticed Taiki's feelings, telling him not to dream too high, mentioning she saw Chinatsu with a boy earlier, but then said she was just teasing. Taiki was indeed uneasy. That night, he realized he left his stuff at the gym. Going back, he found Chinatsu still training alone. She called out Taiki's name again. Unsatisfied with her performance during practice, she wanted to train a bit longer. Seeing Taiki watching her, she passed him the ball, inviting him to play one-on-one. Unfortunately, Taiki lacked the skills and soon collapsed from exhaustion. Still, Chinatsu complimented his agility. Taiki mentioned his mom used to play basketball and would occasionally practice with her. Chinatsu's mom was also in the basketball club. Taiki's eyes lit up. It's fate, he thought. Unfortunately, he had no interest in basketball himself. He never passed the ball when he played before. He realized he wasn't suited for team sports. Badminton was different. Standing alone on the court, all responsibility lay on him. The outcome, good or bad, was his alone. Taiki enjoyed this tension. Chinatsu commented, "So you are a masochist. No wonder he liked to practice so much." But Taiki knew he was no match for his senior. After Chinatsu retired from the middle school club, she resumed training the very next day. That was when he fell in love with her at first sight. Back then, Taiki was still in middle school. Living near the school, he came to pick up something and saw Chinatsu crying alone while practicing. Later, he learned they were just one step away from the national competition. She must have worked so hard, which explained her frustration. Taiki admired such a senior, so he wanted to work hard like her. Hearing this, Chinatsu's face turned red. Even she had forgotten about it. Then, the teacher called them to leave quickly. They packed up together, accidentally holding a basketball together. Their fingertips touched. Taiki felt her hands were warmer than before. The next morning, Taiki packed his lunch for school practice. Seeing a magazine on the table, he flipped to the page about his senior. Unexpectedly, his mom knew Chinatsu because Chinatsu's mom was her old teammate. "It's really fate," Taiki thought excitedly. Then, he heard his mom say Chinatsu's parents were being transferred abroad for work, and they would move in mid-March. Taiki realized the conversation he saw Chinatsu having with the coach might have been about quitting the team. He rushed to school, feeling indignant for her. She came earliest every day, trained the hardest and most desperately, and understood frustration better than anyone. Should she just give up? Out of breath, he arrived at the gym. Chinatsu was there, spacing out. Seeing Taiki's confused face, he blurted out, "Senior Chinatsu, please make it to the national competition." He said the senior taught him that one should strive daily if they have a goal and to keep moving forward even if they lose. So he urged not to give up because her parents were going overseas for work. Before he could finish, Chinatsu interrupted him, "I'm not going abroad. Although my parents are working overseas, I've arranged to stay with an acquaintance for a while." This made Taiki feel embarrassed again. Chinatsu quickly explained that Taiki's words the previous night had reminded her of her time in the middle school club and her initial desire to compete in the national competition, as well as what motivated her to persevere. So, the senior sincerely thanked Taiki and invited him for a rematch, suggesting badminton as well. It was the weekend, and Taiki had not yet recovered from his embarrassment to the extent that he dared not meet Senior Chinatsu. But as he went downstairs, he saw her in his family's dining room, causing him great shock. Then both of their mothers came in and informed Taiki that Chinatsu would be living with them starting today. It turned out the acquaintance she mentioned staying with was Taiki's family. Taiki's family welcomed Chinatsu warmly. Taiki was especially smitten. Every move she made tugged at his heartstrings. He thought about enduring this for 2 more years until she graduated, feeling it was as daunting as going directly to the Olympics as a novice. After her bath, Chinatsu called Taiki to bathe. He was too shy to even look at her, but she approached him, offering to read manga together. Taiki quickly lent her the manga. Chinatsu was very open and admitted that although their mothers were close, she had only met them a few times, so suddenly living in their house was nerve-wracking. However, having Taiki, someone familiar, made her feel much more at ease. After saying goodnight to her little junior, she left Taiki feeling guilty. He was overthinking things while she was so straightforward. He couldn't help but imagine her in the bathtub, which was unbearable. Taiki turned his frustration into motivation during training, only to be cautioned by Kyo to make sure no one found out that he and Senior Chinatsu were living together. After all, the senior is the crush of thousands at their school. If they found out, Taiki's life might be in danger. Of course, Taiki is also very lucky to live with the person he likes. Maybe they could really end up together. But Taiki didn't plan to take advantage of the situation because he knew the senior stayed in Japan solely to play basketball. Facing a senior who dedicated so much to basketball, how could he say something like asking her to be with him? Therefore, Taiki set a goal for himself to make it to the national competition this year. If he couldn't achieve that, it would prove he wasn't worthy of her. Although the goal was high, Taiki was optimistic. Kyo had already gone to rest, but he was still looking for someone to continue training with. At night, he would do basic physical exercises at home and constantly push himself. During breaks, he watched training videos others had recorded for him to analyze. Unexpectedly, Chinatsu caught him and insisted on watching them. Chinatsu thought Taiki was already very impressive for being able to chase the ball quickly on the court, but Taiki said he wasn't fast enough. If he couldn't improve his first step, he wouldn't be able to control the landing spot of the ball better. A player shouldn't just chase the ball, they should handle it more effortlessly. What level was this for the national competition? As soon as he said it, Taiki regretted it. He had wanted to achieve some results before telling the senior. However, she didn't despise him for his foolish aspirations. Instead, she ran back to her room and brought him a bracelet she had made herself when she decided to stay in Japan, using it to represent her resolve. Taiki didn't hesitate and took it, then tied it around his ankle. Seeing him tie it so tightly, Chinatsu took the bracelet and helped him tie it herself, cheering him on and showing him the same bracelet she wore around her ankle. Just like that, they had matching couple bracelets as soon as they started living together. Taiki hadn't snapped out of his happiness yet, thinking only of working harder and harder until he wore out the bracelet. But with her doing this, wouldn't it make him like her even more? So, to rid himself of these distractions, Taiki decided that for every stray thought, he would add 30 sit-ups. He didn't rest even during the spring break and was packed and ready to go early in the morning. Chinatsu stood at the door to see Taiki off, making him feel like a newlywed. This caused him to start doing sit-ups frantically as soon as he got to the gym. Hina noticed something was off and asked him if there was something going on with a senior from the basketball team. Taiki couldn't dare tell Hina, who was known to gossip, that he and Chinatsu were living together. He then bumped into the senior, who told him he had left his wallet at home. Taiki loudly and deliberately thanked the senior for finding the wallet, making her think he didn't want others to know they were living together. She replied and left immediately. Taiki, sensing her mood was off, quickly consulted Kyo, the only one who knew. Kyo, a great assist, helped Taiki analyze Chinatsu's feelings, causing him to panic. When the teacher assigned them to move chairs together, Taiki volunteered to help her, but the senior pretended not to know him. Instead, Hina openly started a conversation with her, asking if she had a boyfriend. Chinatsu didn't, and when asked if she wanted one, she said no, as she was too busy with club activities. Taiki wasn't surprised by her response. After moving the chairs, the coach, who had heard the badminton coach praising Taiki, mentioned his improved striking power and physical fitness, hinting he might qualify for the national preliminaries. Taiki wanted to share this joy with the senior, but only saw her walking away. Chinatsu was too concerned about the misunderstanding that she didn't want others to know they were living together. During training, she fell, and Taiki, feeling he wasn't in a position to approach her as they weren't close, followed her silently to the locker room. He took the opportunity, when no one was around, to care for her and apologize, explaining his true feelings. On one hand, he was hesitant to speak about living together with the senior. On the other, she was too popular, and he feared gossip could affect their club activities. That's why Taiki pretended not to know her. Chinatsu didn't expect this to be the reason. She thought Taiki liked that girl from the gymnastics club, especially since he started acting distant around her only after Hina appeared. Moreover, Hina had asked her if she had a boyfriend, which felt like she was probing. Chinatsu thought Taiki didn't want his crush to know they were living together. To avoid arousing Hina's suspicions, she deliberately kept her distance from Taiki and even considered moving out to a low-rent apartment. Taiki didn't realize the senior had thought so much about it, which he found adorable. He couldn't help but laugh heartily and called the senior silly, a scene Hina just happened to witness. The preliminaries were approaching. The badminton club would start its internal selection next week. Taiki's set goals seemed far-fetched. First, to qualify within the team, then to make it to the top 16 in the regional preliminaries, and only the top 2 from there would qualify for the nationals. At least he needed to win against Kengo, the third best in the county, to have a chance. Upon hearing this, Taiki thought, if he could beat Kengo, nationals were within reach. However, it seemed a bit crowded at the club today, mainly because most people were there to see Chinatsu, while the rest were there for Hina. Hina's coach was particularly fond of her, even calling her a girl blessed by the god of rhythmic gymnastics. Their goal was directly to be Japan's #1, especially since Hina had already secured 4th place nationally in middle school, and her father was on the Japanese national gymnastics team. Listening to their conversation, Taiki accidentally stared at Hina and was jokingly asked to pay 2,000 yen as an admission fee. Unfortunately, Taiki treated Hina like a brother, only feeling smitten when he turned to see Chinatsu. After school, Hina caught up with him again. Because Hina was going to a store near Taiki's house today, Taiki suddenly felt uneasy. If Hina saw Chinatsu entering his house, it would be problematic. Chinatsu was still at school practicing, so he wanted to quickly take Hina to the store. However, Hina easily got distracted by various things, like stopping in her tracks at the sight of taiyaki. Taiki tearfully paid for it, but then Hina refused to eat it because it exceeded her calorie limit. She needed to maintain her weight strictly. Even a few hundred grams could affect her performance. To avoid more trouble, Hina chose to endure. Taiki thought Chinatsu was amazing for resisting the taiyaki. It was already a challenge, yet Hina didn't consider it an effort, as she always held herself to strict standards, treating it as the norm. Taiki admired this disciplined side of Hina, and his words made her heart flutter. Still, she thought Taiki was even more impressive, especially since he was brave enough to pursue Chinatsu. As his close friend, she naturally hoped he would succeed. While they were chatting, they both saw Chinatsu and Kengo laughing and walking together. Taiki was heartbroken to see his crush, the senior goddess, laughing and walking down the street with a handsome senior. Hina quickly comforted him, insisting they were just good friends, pointing out that she and Taiki also walked home together. Taiki deceived himself with this thought, but the next day, he saw the senior couple chatting again. They were classmates, desk mates, and both class representatives. Taiki's heart broke again. Even though the senior had said she would focus on club activities and not date, how could one stop liking someone? Kengo, the star of their badminton club, was undoubtedly excellent, but the coach also had high hopes for Taiki. While resting, Taiki picked up balls for the senior, his mind full of yesterday's images. Chinatsu asked him when the club activities would end because she had forgotten her keys. They were whispering when Kengo suddenly interrupted, calling Chinatsu Chi. Taiki was devastated, especially since she seemed so used to it. Was it because they were desk mates, or was it a bond between the top athletes of the sports clubs? Taiki walked home dejected, whispering the senior's name at his doorstep, only for Chinatsu to open the door the next second, disgusted with himself. Chinatsu hadn't expected her junior to get home before her. When she left school, the badminton club had just entered the activity room. She asked Taiki if he had run back to avoid getting home first and had waited outside because she anticipated this situation and had even waited a bit in the activity room. Taiki's irritation vanished instantly, realizing the senior had noticed his every move, revitalizing him. He thought of running another lap just to calm his emotions and reevaluate his relationship with the senior. Suddenly, Chinatsu moving into his house made him think they were close, but realistically, he was not at her level. He shouldn't obsess over who she talked to and should focus on the internal selections, moving towards his dreams to one day stand beside her as an equal. Taiki is among the top newcomers, but facing the main players is a different story, especially Kengo, who has never lost a match. However, Taiki has decided not to let whatever relationship Chinatsu and Kengo have affect him. The very next moment, he sees Chinatsu cheering for Kengo at the badminton team's internal selection and feels a sour twist in his heart. He tells himself he doesn't care, but overhears another senior asking Kengo about his recent closeness with Chinatsu. Kengo says there's nothing between them but admires her dedication. At this point, Taiki is almost shattered, especially when his next opponent is Kengo, and he loses 5-1. Kyo and Hina are distressed watching this. By halftime, the score is 11-4, yet Taiki doesn't seem discouraged, focusing only on the points he missed. Kyo is surprised, wondering if Taiki isn't bothered by his earlier concerns. Taiki admits Chinatsu inspires him to work harder, but doesn't want to use her as an excuse for losing. He plays badminton because he loves the sport, not for Chinatsu. As the second half begins, Taiki, retying his shoelaces, sees his anklet and feels more determined. He remains calm, steadily returning every shot, but the gap from the first half is too large, and he loses the match. Although Taiki is likely to qualify for the preliminaries with his current record, he can't feel happy. Even though he played well in the second half, Kengo controlled the match's pace, leaving Taiki unwilling to accept defeat, unaware that Kengo feels the same. On the way home from school, Taiki reflected on his own shortcomings compared to the seniors. He realized he needed to work harder and gain more experience. Unexpectedly, Chinatsu caught up with him and suggested they go to a special place. She led Taiki to a park where, to his surprise, she pulled out a pair of badminton rackets. She guessed he would want to practice more after their match. Despite not being good at badminton, Chinatsu joined him. As they played and talked, she mentioned that losing the match didn't mean Taiki was weak, especially since he scored more in the second half than Kengo. Still, Taiki felt unsatisfied, attributing the first half's poor performance to a skill gap, which made Chinatsu laugh. Chinatsu had been paying attention to Taiki, aware of the issues the coach pointed out during training, which Taiki diligently practiced during morning sessions. Even after recognizing his skill gap with Kengo, he didn't give up but instead played better in the second half. Taiki was comforted by her words, understanding them better coming from someone he liked. While they were playing, Chinatsu received a message from Taiki's mother asking when she would return home. Taiki noticed a charm with the name Chi on Chinatsu's bag. She explained it was a gift from a classmate, as her classmates called her Chi. This reassured Taiki that the nickname was not exclusive to Kengo. Chinatsu initially wanted to go home with Taiki, but he felt it was inappropriate for them to be seen living together, as it could reflect poorly on her. He suggested she go ahead while he stayed back to practice a little longer. The badminton team's roster was finally announced. Surprisingly, Taiki and senior Kengo were paired for doubles. Kyo thought it awkward to team up with a rival for the national competition. Taiki, on the other hand, was focused on beating Kengo, wondering how he could win in doubles. Before he could finish his thought, Kengo called him for training. During the session, Kengo overheard Taiki mention that he didn't like Chinatsu, which led Kengo to directly ask if Taiki had feelings for her. Despite the pressure, they both got serious about training. However, Taiki couldn't match Kengo's stamina, and Kengo teased him using Chinatsu as motivation, suggesting her future boyfriend would need to be formidable. This spurred Taiki into training intensely for a week, leaving him exhausted. Kengo's rigorous fitness regime was daunting, but Taiki made noticeable improvements. Kyo thought Kengo was genuinely helping Taiki, while Hina speculated that Kengo was showing off to intimidate Taiki. However, Taiki didn't suspect any ulterior motives as their training was equally tough. Kengo's speed and control remained superior. If only Taiki could reach his physical condition, playing would be more enjoyable. His friends teased him about being a masochist for enduring such hard training. Besides physical training, Kengo also gave Taiki valuable advice. Leaving school exhausted, Taiki ran into Kengo and Chinatsu. Kengo introduced Taiki to everyone as his doubles partner, humorously critiquing his skills but affirming that Taiki could become stronger. Now everyone, including the seniors, joked about Taiki's resilience. Chinatsu quietly complimented Taiki on his toughness. Suddenly, Kengo checked his phone, mentioning his girlfriend was looking for him. Shocked, Taiki exclaimed, "What? You have a girlfriend?" It turned out Kengo's girlfriend was from the entertainment industry, and they had just started dating after she confessed to him. Following a time when he almost gave up, Kengo had been teasing Taiki all along, with Chinatsu's help in picking out cosmetics playing a role in his new relationship. Taiki realized that Kengo had just been joking with him. Chinatsu has been living at Taiki's house for a month now. Every morning, Taiki sees the dazzling sight of his goddess. He doesn't even feel like staying in bed anymore. However, because he's been so distracted, he picked up the wrong sports uniform one morning. After lunch, Kyo started asking about Taiki's cohabitation with his senior. Just then, Taiki received a message from his senior. Realizing he had taken Chinatsu's sports uniform, they needed to find a secluded place to exchange it. On the way, they ran into senior Kengo. Feeling guilty, Taiki turned around and declined his training invitation, hurrying off to the multimedia classroom. Unexpectedly, Hina and her friends were there, as the gymnastics team was meeting there today. Just then, another girl bumped into Taiki, knocking the clothes out of his arms, revealing Chinatsu's name on them. Taiki panicked, splashing dirty water on himself to prevent Hina from picking up the clothes, claiming they hadn't been washed since the summer of 9th grade. Hina immediately stepped back, remembering Taiki always wore that uniform for training. Could it really have been unwashed all this time? Taiki had no choice but to own up. Time was running out before Chinatsu's gym class, and the place was crowded. Luckily, his senior messaged him to meet on the rooftop. Seeing Chinatsu in her school uniform, Taiki was momentarily stunned. Chinatsu, unconcerned, started changing right in front of him, mentioning that the girls in their sports department were all trained and unguarded. Taiki couldn't resist, so he turned his back, but even just hearing the sounds, his imagination ran wild. As images flashed through his mind, when Chinatsu emerged dressed, Taiki had to crouch to hide his body's reaction, letting his senior leave first. Though it was a wonderful experience, upon reflection, it threw cold water on Taiki. Chinatsu daring to change in front of him might mean she doesn't see him as a man, so Taiki decided to toughen up his masculinity. After training, Hina called him, knowing his preliminaries were starting tomorrow, and cheered him on. Senior Kengo was about to say something, but Taiki quickly denied it. Kengo told him not to worry, as they would surely win the doubles. For next week's singles, making the top 16 was enough. Taiki was irked, believing he could make the top 4. Kindly, Kengo reminded him, "You forgot your bag." That evening, as his mother was busily packing for Taiki, he claimed he had already packed everything. Then, the next moment, he accidentally spilled water on the sports uniform. Taiki felt he was too nervous, even though it was his first high school competition. He had attended big events before. Such nerves could lead to basic mistakes tomorrow. The more he thought, the more agitated he became, so he went to the yard to practice his swings. Chinatsu heard the noise and came out to see that Taiki had his clothes on backwards. He changed right in front of her, making her blush. She hadn't realized her junior had such a good physique, clearly showing the effects of his recent muscle training. Yet, Taiki was still not satisfied with himself, knowing muscles didn't mean better badminton skills. Sensing his tension, Chinatsu approached him and poked him on the head at a pressure point to relax him. Whether it was the acupressure or her soothing words, Taiki felt calmer. Then Chinatsu added, "You still have next year and the year after." But Taiki's first thought was that she would have graduated by then. The next day, Taiki and senior Kengo confidently went to the competition venue. Their doubles match went too smoothly, with Taiki feeling Kengo had to keep saving the game. It seemed he still had much to practice. Then, another player who had just won his match saw Kengo and kicked at him, which Kengo easily dodged. They had been partners in the youth team. The player, with a mohawk, accused Kengo of breaking a promise to share Chinatsu's contact details. He had fallen for Chinatsu at last year's school festival and had been pestering Kengo to introduce them since. Kengo had never followed through. The mohawk player then jokingly asked Taiki if that was too much. Taiki just thought Kengo did well. In an attempt to get Chinatsu's contact, the mohawk player vowed to win today's doubles match, but his teammate was soon taken away by an ambulance due to stomach pain. Kengo and Taiki won without a fight, but the mohawk player declared he would settle it in next week's singles with Kengo. Unfortunately for him, Kengo didn't need to play the preliminaries, so he pushed Taiki to face his former partner. If he beat Taiki, he would reveal Chinatsu's contact details. Taiki was shocked. The mohawk player sized him up, confident of winning. Taiki was tempted to punch his senior, thinking, "You really are bad." Thus, Taiki was determined to defeat the mohawk player to protect Chinatsu's contact information. Back home, Taiki overheard a conversation between Chinatsu and his mother. Remembering the awkward moment when they parted last night, he felt unsure how to face her. To his surprise, Chinatsu felt the same. Both his mother and Chinatsu wondered why Taiki was pushing so hard when there were still 2 years left. Last night, when Chinatsu mentioned this, the mood turned cold. Reflecting on it, Chinatsu realized her words might imply that losing this year was okay, which wasn't her intention. She thought about how quickly a year passes, and with only 1 year left for herself, she envied Taiki. Her words were more about her own fears than encouraging Taiki. Thus, she kept reflecting, while her mother simply thought she was a good kid. At that moment, Taiki appeared and declared to his mother and Chinatsu that he must win the singles match too, because he couldn't let Chinatsu feel uneasy. The day of the singles match finally arrived, and Taiki faced the Mohawk player. Kyo had heard from Taiki about Kengo's bet involving Chinatsu's contact details and thought it was unfair. Kengo clarified that he would not disclose the contact details if Chinatsu herself was unwilling. He believed Taiki would win. If Taiki lost, however, he would face a special training plan devised by Kengo, which made Taiki shiver. The first game began, and the Mohawk player's smashes were powerful, seemingly overpowering Taiki. The nearby practicing women's basketball team came to watch, noticing that the situation seemed unfavorable for Taiki. Only Kengo believed it was part of Taiki's strategy, knowing him to be a slow starter who initially focuses on returning the ball to exhaust his opponent, making the opponent run more. Kyo felt reassured and went to prepare for his own activities. Passing by Chinatsu, he asked why she wasn't watching from a closer spot. Just then, Taiki narrowly returned another smash, causing Chinatsu's hands to tremble with nervousness. Kyo then informed her that the match stakes were her contact details. According to Kengo's bet, even if Taiki won, he wouldn't gain any advantage. Therefore, Kyo asked on Taiki's behalf, if Taiki won, Chinatsu should accompany him to the aquarium. Kyo also mentioned that Taiki had been performing well lately, catching balls he previously couldn't, likely motivated by having someone with similar goals around him. Thinking of her energetic and hardworking junior, Chinatsu didn't want Taiki's efforts to go unrewarded. Just then, Taiki scored another point, and Chinatsu's heart raced with excitement. She agreed that if Taiki won, she would go to the aquarium with him. If Taiki won the match, he could go on a date to the aquarium with his senior. Unaware of this, Taiki still gave his all and caught the opponent's ball. The player with the Mohawk was just a step too short and missed the ball, resulting in Taiki's victory. The Mohawk player was not pleased and challenged Taiki to a practice match at their school, reminding him to check the women's basketball team's practice schedule. Taiki was so annoyed he almost cursed on the spot. After all the matches, Taiki achieved second place. A sophomore from his school got first, but it was fine since they had already qualified for the county preliminaries. Hina came to comfort him, saying that reaching second place as a freshman was impressive. Then Taiki's phone rang. He was shocked to see a message from his senior inviting him to the aquarium the next day. Excited beyond words, Taiki puzzled Hina, who wondered when they had become so close. Kyo explained that he had seen Chinatsu, the senior, at the match, and asked her to reward Taiki for his win. Hina got excited too, celebrating Taiki's first date with his crush. She seemed more thrilled than Taiki, almost as if she was forcing it. She quickly left when someone called her, with her team noticing her unhappy demeanor since she showed no joy for Taiki. That night, Taiki was too excited to go home, and even did push-ups at the door to calm down, which his mother noticed. Once inside, Chinatsu had already returned to her room, and Taiki stayed up late, unable to sleep, looking at a marine life atlas and imagining Chinatsu in a dress. Just thinking about her in a dress made him feel overwhelmed. Hearing noise from her room, he realized she was also awake. Unable to contain his excitement, Taiki overslept the next morning, waking up at 9:30 in a rush and barely considering what to wear. He hurriedly put on a shirt and rushed to the station, dropping his wallet and scrambling to pick up the coins. After seeing him, the senior came over and patted him on the back. She was actually wearing a dress. Taiki almost thanked her aloud, completely captivated. Then, they both went to the aquarium. Chinatsu seemed very excited, a side of her Taiki had never seen before. Watching her play with the fish instantly charmed him. Yet, he was internally conflicted about what the senior might think of their outing together. Most likely, the senior just wanted to go out and agreed to Kyo's request. However, she might also be upset that Taiki used her as a bet. Therefore, Taiki decided to cover all her expenses today. Just as he made this decision, Chinatsu suddenly took a photo of him, claiming it was for keepsake. Taiki was embarrassed and anxious, but couldn't insist she delete the photo. They spent the whole day at the aquarium. Chinatsu even hugged a giant mascot, making Taiki almost green with envy. They also watched the penguins. While Chinatsu was watching the penguins, Taiki couldn't help but keep looking at her. Suddenly, a little boy accidentally bumped into Chinatsu, causing their hands to touch. Taiki's heart raced, hoping they could visit again as a couple next time. Yet, considering a confession might make the senior uncomfortable if she found out, he decided to keep his feelings to himself for now. As the date was about to end, Taiki was about to leave when Chinatsu grabbed him, saying she had something to tell him. A secret hope rose in Taiki's heart. Could the senior possibly feel the same? However, Chinatsu started by apologizing. She was still troubled about something she had told Taiki before, saying he still had 2 years left. She felt she couldn't continue living with Taiki's family without properly apologizing. On one hand, Taiki thought Chinatsu was being too serious. On the other, he felt ashamed of his own thoughts today. It turned out she had asked him out only to comfort and apologize. He didn't mind such a trifle, having not dwelled on it at all, even shocked that the senior had been troubled by it all week. However, since the senior was staying at someone else's house, she was inevitably cautious. So, Taiki sent her a penguin emoji to use whenever she felt uncomfortable at home or wanted to talk to him. This way, Taiki would listen to her concerns. Unexpectedly, right after he explained this, Chinatsu sent one just to tell Taiki that he was a great roommate. Back at school, Taiki was re-energized and immensely grateful to his friends, beyond what words could express. Then Kyo brought up an important question. What if the senior also liked him? Just the thought excited Taiki tremendously. He happened to make eye contact with the senior, and Chinatsu, smiling, pointed at her mouth to indicate he had food on his face. Taiki's face showed a hint of delight. He would definitely be happy to date her. Suddenly, Hina came over and interrupted his daydream, annoyed at his sneaky smile. Kyo, watching Hina thoughtfully, then reminded Taiki that there was no time to revel in fantasies, especially with the county preliminaries approaching. The competition was fierce, particularly from another high school that was leading the pack and had won last year's national championship. Upon hearing this, Hina cheered Taiki on, confident in her own upcoming gymnastics competition. While they were talking, the artistic gymnastics advisor approached with reporters to interview Hina, who now sported a proud expression. Although Hina was a star in the competitions, to Taiki and Kyo, she was just an ordinary girl. Would that intimidating high school be viewed the same way? Athletes often need orthopedic services. Hina unexpectedly ran into Chinatsu at the orthopedic clinic. Noticing the charms on Chinatsu's bag, Hina felt conflicted but thought she should support her friend. She asked Chinatsu if she knew about the time Taiki sprained his ankle in 8th grade, then started telling the story herself. During a school camping trip, Hina slipped while hiking and Taiki saved her, but he twisted his own ankle, making him unable to practice sports for a week. Hina felt guilty, but Taiki said he should blame his poor reaction and even found a new challenge to work on. With a sigh, Hina remarked that he really was a foolishly passionate badminton player, but helping others was indeed a virtue. After sharing this, Hina felt proud, thinking she had spoken well of Taiki, unaware that Chinatsu had seen through her intentions. Chinatsu realized that this junior might have a crush on Taiki, hesitated to speak, but ultimately remained silent. When they left, it started raining, and Chinatsu lent Hina an umbrella, but accidentally left her phone in the clinic. Hina offered to return it and followed Chinatsu, only to see her entering Taiki's house where he came out to greet her. Their conversation sounded as if they had been living together for a long time. At that moment, Hina was taken aback. My best friend secretly moved in with the girl of my dreams. What does that make me, his childhood friend? Hina was utterly shocked. Why was Chinatsu at Taiki's house? She didn't know what had happened between them. Initially planning to leave and ask at school the next day, she remembered she came to return Chinatsu's phone. She shouted Taiki's name from outside the wall and angrily demanded an explanation. With no more secrets to hide, Chinatsu nodded for Taiki to tell Hina everything. Taiki explained the situation, feeling guilty for keeping it from Hina. Hina was indeed angry, realizing how her friends viewed her. She dumped a pile of manga on Taiki's lap as punishment for him to kneel and accept. However, Hina wouldn't talk about this outside, especially since it involved Chinatsu, and even mocked Taiki for not making any progress after living together for 2 months. Despite saying this, Hina felt an indescribable emotion walking home, realizing why their relationship seemed to improve. They had been living together without her knowing. This realization unsettled her, yet she performed perfectly in practice the next day, impressing her coach who believed she could win the national championship. Hina was proud until she saw Chinatsu, which distracted her. She knew her performance wasn't flawless. One move was nearly botched, causing a delay. Alone upstairs, she meticulously reviewed the details, not wanting to disappoint her hopeful coach and teammates. The thought of making a mistake in a big competition filled her with fear. When she saw Taiki alone downstairs and was about to greet him, she suddenly stopped, walked up quietly beside him, and spoke in his ear to startle him. Taiki had accidentally stepped on something, hurting his foot, which he was tending to when Hina noticed the anklet from Chinatsu. Taiki blushed and said it was a gift from Chinatsu. Hina felt hurt but pretended it didn't matter, teasingly asking if he was dating Chinatsu. Taiki quickly denied it, saying they just shared a common goal. Little did Hina know, this relationship also seemed ambiguous to her. After all, if she got tired from practice, she would surely think of the person who shared her goal. Her gaze was drawn again to Chinatsu on the court. Then she saw Taiki and thought about the two of them caring for each other and striving towards their shared goal. Tears welled up in Hina's eyes as she recognized her emotions. She quickly reminded herself that the big competition was near and she could not afford any distractions, for she was alone and had to fight alone. In the following days, Hina was alone, and her performance kept getting worse. She made frequent mistakes in training, which immediately worried her coach. Hina forced a smile and explained it was due to lack of sleep from watching dramas. Kyo noticed Hina's condition and mentioned it to Taiki. Unexpectedly, when Taiki greeted her, she ignored him. Kyo saw through it all and hinted to Taiki that Hina might be upset with him. In reality, Hina was intentionally distancing herself from Taiki, not wanting to hinder his pursuit of his crush, especially since the two were already living together and might end up together eventually. Hina's teammates thought she was pushing herself too hard and hoped she would rest, but Hina felt she could not afford to rest. While buying a drink, she ran into the head teacher, who praised her excellent performance in an interview and knew the big competition was coming. He encouraged Hina to do her best and not disappoint her father, a member of Japan's national team, and asked when her father could visit the school. After the head teacher left, Hina nearly crumbled under the pressure. She was just a regular high school freshman but had to carry so many expectations. She wished she could joke and chat casually with Taiki, who always charged forward recklessly. But when she entered the sports center and saw Taiki, at this vulnerable moment, Hina finally recognized her own feelings, yet turned and fled because she knew she had to strive alone. However, after that, Hina's condition improved, and both teammates and coach were reassured. They were confident she could easily win the preliminaries, but unexpectedly, Hina was knocked down by an athlete at the door and twisted her ankle, shattering all her plans in an instant. Her mind was filled with worries about how the ankle sprain might affect her performance. Already in a bad state, she thought, "What do I do? What do I do?" Hina couldn't think straight anymore. Just then, Taiki knelt in front of her, insisting they go to the medical room first. Taiki was about to help her up, but Hina refused, concerned about being seen by her senior, Chinatsu. Taiki was speechless, wondering if this was really the time to worry about that. Meanwhile, Kyo hurried off to call a teacher. Taiki then supported Hina to the medical room. The doctor examined her and found nothing serious, just a bump from the fall. It should stop hurting in a few minutes. Understanding that elite athletes are sensitive to pain before big competitions, the doctor advised Hina to apply ice. Taiki, relieved, stayed by her side. Hina used this opportunity to vent all her recent troubles and complaints. Taiki played the role of a psychologist very well. What frustrated Hina the most was that when people saw her excellence, they immediately thought of her father. But what did her own efforts have to do with her dad? Then, changing the subject, she mentioned there was someone she might not be able to beat. Taiki was shocked to hear Hina talk like this, but the person Hina referred to was Chinatsu, and the referee in this emotional conflict was Taiki, who was blindly sided with Chinatsu, completely captivated by her. Hina herself fully realized Chinatsu's charm and felt like fleeing from such a formidable opponent. Unfortunately, Taiki didn't understand her implied meaning and felt that with Hina's character, she would never run away. Her pride wouldn't allow it. This assumption of Taiki's made Hina even more determined not to give up. How could she walk away? Moreover, Taiki had a point. How could she retreat without a fight? After applying a cold compress for a while, Hina's foot stopped hurting. On their way back, she shyly asked Taiki to cheer for her. Although somewhat puzzled, Taiki immediately responded with an earnest, "You can do it," bringing a bright smile back to Hina's face. She then successfully won first place in the county preliminaries and no longer avoided Taiki. Instead, she deliberately showcased her charm. Kyo, standing by, smiled silently and turned his attention to senior Chinatsu, waiting to see her next move. Lately, with the increase in training, Taiki has been going to bed earlier. One day, while going upstairs, he ran into Chinatsu. She had seen Hina at the orthopedic clinic that day and was impressed by the younger girl, who had won first place in the county competition as a freshman. Taiki couldn't help but comment that Hina herself was not satisfied, always feeling her performance wasn't perfect enough. He laughed and called her a rhythmic gymnastics fool, echoing Hina's earlier description of Taiki. Chinatsu suddenly thought the two were quite a match. Living with Taiki, She wondered if she was superfluous. However, she quickly dismissed the thought, as she had no romantic feelings for Taiki. Everything was for basketball, and she would continue to live there until she reached her goal. Indeed, senior Chinatsu was not one for internal strife. As the competition day for Taiki and Chinatsu drew closer, their training intensified. Taiki pestered his senior Kengo daily to practice with him, but never won a single game, which made Kengo reluctant to continue, as constant losses were not a good omen for the upcoming competition. This was a lesson for Kengo himself, who had only placed third in the county after losing to a top player from another school, while his opponent went on to win the national championship. After being pointedly reminded of this by his teammates, a stern glance from Kengo acknowledged his need for more practice, leading him to let Taiki train alone. After all, they would soon be competitors in the singles matches. Meanwhile, Chinatsu's women's basketball team rested near the entrance. Their county preliminaries were set for next Saturday, and the badminton competitions would start on the 18th. Her teammates were curious how she knew about the dates, surprised to learn that she followed the school newspaper. This made Taiki secretly hope that perhaps Chinatsu was also keeping an eye on his matches. After school, Taiki pondered how to spend the remaining 10 days, regretting not practicing his backhand sooner. Seeing Chinatsu with a heavy load, he hesitated to help, fearing it might be misunderstood by others. Eventually, he offered his help anyway, but she declined, teasing him about being shy to walk home together. Pretending they had bumped into each other by chance, Taiki took her bag, and they played along, making their way home together. Taiki seized the opportunity to ask how she was settling in since moving. Chinatsu said everyone was kind and gentle, making her feel very welcomed, a description Taiki found hard to associate with his own family. She added that living there allowed her to pursue goals she had given up on, making it a great move for her. Inspired, Taiki impulsively challenged her to rock, paper, scissors, and upon winning, asked her to accompany him to a nearby shrine. There, they prayed for victory in their respective competitions, with Taiki sincerely hoping for Chinatsu's success, especially since she had moved to compete at the national level. While there, he also prayed for his own success, deeply respecting her determination and unwilling to let it go unnoticed. The women's basketball competition is this weekend. Chinatsu's team won their first game, and their old rivals won their preliminary as well. If things go as expected, these two schools will face off in the county semifinals again this year. This time, Chinatsu is determined to win. After the game, she unexpectedly encountered her opponents analyzing the match. They were watching Chinatsu's recent game, and their key player sharply criticized Chinatsu, noting no improvement from previous scrimmages, which was somewhat disappointing for her. Just as Chinatsu's teammate was about to confront them, Chinatsu stopped her. It's common for opponents to comment during a game analysis, and she felt there was no need to argue. Meanwhile, Taiki lost to senior Kengo again. While feeling discontent, he saw the women's team return. Despite winning, they didn't seem very happy. He overheard Chinatsu's teammates discussing how their rivals had belittled them. Knowing how committed Chinatsu was to this year's competition, having moved away from her family to live alone, it upset them to hear such disparagement. Taiki understood and felt surprised that even Chinatsu could be subject to criticism. Turning around, he found Chinatsu nearby. She knew her teammates cared, and Taiki wanted to comfort her, telling her to ignore the criticism as long as her teammates recognized her effort and ability. However, Chinatsu took it to heart. She not only remembered their words, but also wanted to prove herself by winning against them. Nothing speaks louder than proving one's strength on the field. Taiki was deeply impressed by her determination, feeling a thrill at her assertiveness. Both Chinatsu and Hina were pursuing victory in their own ways, which gave Taiki a sense of urgency. He couldn't afford to lose to them. With such determination, Taiki finally beat senior Kengo for the first time. Having practiced against him for so long, he knew Kengo's trickiest skill was hitting the shuttlecock to unexpected places. Therefore, Taiki always had to quickly adjust his stance and focus intently on Kengo's racket to anticipate where the shuttlecock would go. This time, he caught Kengo's shot again. Kengo, unable to return the shot, admitted he had been careless, especially since not long ago, Taiki couldn't keep up with that shot. However, he was happy for Taiki's improvement just before the big competition. Kengo then played more seriously, but Taiki kept up with his pace. Even his teammates felt he might really shine in the next day's big competition. Suddenly, their coach called a halt to save their energy before the competition day, suggesting they save their energy for the finals instead. Kengo reluctantly stopped and agreed to meet Taiki in the finals. Taiki realized he might actually stand a chance against Kengo and possibly advance to the national competition. Suddenly, Kyo asked him if he planned to confess if he got into the nationals. Taiki's mind raced ahead to imagining a wedding with Chinatsu. It seemed he really wanted to confess. However, Taiki had no such intentions, fearing the awkwardness if Chinatsu rejected him as she was living at his house. Despite struggling to suppress his feelings, Taiki didn't want to upset Chinatsu in any way. They then ran into the badminton team seniors who mentioned the coach was treating them to snacks, allowing each to choose items worth up to 500 yen. Taiki and Kyo went to pick theirs out. Spotting a magazine about the sea, Taiki imagined Chinatsu in a swimsuit and decided he must ask her out soon. Of course, the national competition is more important right now. Unexpectedly, after shopping, they ran into the gymnastics team and the women's basketball team, with Hina and Chinatsu among them. Kyo, anticipating trouble, turned to leave but was caught by Taiki. Hina noticed them and came over, unceremoniously taking a piece of fried chicken from Taiki. Chinatsu just stood there, silently watching them. Finally, Hina said she would bring homemade bento to cheer them on the last day of the competition, and then left. The others scattered quickly. With no more money, the teacher obviously couldn't treat these students, so Chinatsu asked Taiki if she could have a piece of chicken. Taiki couldn't refuse, and seeing how happily Chinatsu ate made his heart melt. However, Chinatsu mentioned she felt envious seeing Hina eat and cheered Taiki on before catching up with her friends, leaving Taiki alone. Puzzled, was Chinatsu envious of the chicken, or was it something else? After beating Senior Kengo in a match, Taiki gained confidence in his abilities. Early in the morning, Chinatsu saw Taiki doing radio calisthenics in the yard. Today was the day of the badminton tournament. Taiki was worried he might be too nervous and stiff, but he felt surprisingly eager. So, Chinatsu joined him and instantly found Taiki adorable. Today's match was doubles, with only one team qualifying for the nationals. Tomorrow, 2 players could qualify in the singles, and it was also the final day of Chinatsu's basketball tournament. All their efforts would be tested tomorrow. Seeing the expectant look in her senior's eyes, Taiki couldn't help but ask if he could pose a question after tomorrow's match. He wanted to understand what Chinatsu meant that night. Chinatsu did not refuse, but her question for Taiki couldn't wait until tomorrow. What was the badminton team's cheer? Taiki told her it was "win the point." The senior laughed and cheered for him. "Win the point." She shone brightly in the sunlight, overwhelming Taiki. Finally, they arrived at the venue where all competitors were ready. Taiki and Kengo's match was up soon, but next, they would face Kengo's rival. Kengo took Taiki to watch the current match of Hyodo from Sajikawa High School and his partner, who had been outperforming Kengo for years. The opponents sneered at Kengo upon seeing him, but Kengo retorted without backing down. However, talk was pointless now. They would soon settle the score. Senior Kengo was skilled at playing tricky shots, but Hyodo could do both trick shots and straight shots, making him a formidable 6-sided fighter on the court. The audience could clearly see the difference in level between the teams. The outcome was almost predetermined. It was just a question of how many points they could score against Hyodo. Kengo knew his opponent well, but was surprised by Taiki's reaction. Taiki showed no fear, only excitement and readiness to compete. While watching Hyodo play, Taiki reflected on his own skills, imagining where he would hit the shuttlecock. He was eager to try playing as well, but his senior quickly reminded him that talking about it was easy. They would soon have their chance to play as their match was next. The two then split up to warm up. Just after leaving the restroom, Taiki noticed someone resting on a chair with a wallet fallen on the ground and pointed it out to them. After Taiki left, the person on the chair, touched by his kindness, thought to himself that while Taiki was a good person, good people aren't necessarily suited for badminton. The jacket on the chair slipped off, revealing a Sajikawa team uniform, indicating that this person, Yusa, was on the same team as Hyodo. As everyone anxiously awaited their matches, Yusa alternated between sleeping and playing with a skipping rope, until he was called to watch the seniors' match. At that moment, Hyodo's team was playing against Kengo's team, with Kengo and Taiki trailing by nearly double the points. However, Yusa mentioned they weren't playing poorly, only lacking a decisive winning shot. Despite Hyodo's aggressive play, Kengo managed well, and Taiki, a freshman, put up a strong fight. The pair coordinated quite well, but their opponents were tough. Taiki's spike went over, but Hyodo failed to receive it, though the shuttlecock landed out of bounds. The first game ended in defeat for Kengo and Taiki, and the spectators felt sorry for them. Kengo reminded Taiki not to dwell on the past, and to focus on winning the next game. Unfortunately, no miracle occurred, and they lost the match. When Chinatsu got home, she found Taiki asleep on the table, with an open notebook in front of him scribbled with the words, "I must practice my spikes." Chinatsu, initially unsure how to comfort Taiki, quickly realized that the young underclassman wouldn't be discouraged by this setback. Still, she wrote in his notebook, "I must also practice my shooting." She didn't mention Taiki's loss, but told him she would strive alongside him. When Taiki woke up and saw her note, his spirits lifted slightly. The next day featured singles matches. According to the draw, Taiki would face Hayoto before Kengo. Despite losing to him in doubles the day before, Taiki was not intimidated and resolved to give his all to win, starting with the first game. This unexpected determination surprised Kengo, but it was just Taiki's way. Taiki held a firm belief that even against the country's top players, he would persist and fight to the end. He knew Chinatsu, competing elsewhere, felt the same. However, to his surprise, he was defeated by another opponent before he could face Hayoto. The opponent was Yusa, whom he had briefly met before. The skill gap was clear. After the match, Taiki was still processing what had happened as he mechanically went to shake hands and bow to his opponent. Hina arrived late only to learn that Taiki had already lost, ending his journey at the national competition. It became clear that effort does not always lead to success, as there will always be someone more diligent or talented. Sports are cruel that way, and Hina, a gymnast, understood this well. Unsure of how to comfort Taiki, it was he who broke the silence first. Hina then offered him some snacks she had bought. Both felt uneasy, yet they maintained a facade of cheerfulness. Taiki was well aware that his skill level made it difficult to compete in the nationals. He had set such a lofty goal to push himself forward relentlessly. Surprisingly, he had won a game against Senior Kengo during training, which gave him the illusion that he could qualify for the nationals. Reality struck hard, but Taiki did not give up. On the other side, the match between Hayoto and Kengo was fiercely contested. After resting, Taiki went to cheer for Senior Kengo. Unfortunately, Kengo didn't win, and Hayoto remained the county champion. Reality can be harsh, seeming like an insurmountable mountain lies before everyone. However, Kengo still secured second place, a position he had achieved several times before. Taiki didn't return with the seniors. He left early, reminding himself not to get disheartened and to take action immediately. He resolved to do better next year. Being only a freshman, he still had 2 more opportunities. Even without senior Chinatsu, he couldn't stop moving forward. Upon arriving home, he heard laughter and joy from the living room. It appeared Chinatsu had a successful day and had qualified for the national competition. The recently disheartened Taiki instantly felt happy for his senior, admiring her ability to achieve what she set out to do. Yet, he reflected on his own shortcomings, realizing he hadn't managed to accomplish his goals. As soon as Taiki got home, he learned that his senior had made it to the national competition. His sense of loss from being eliminated was instantly replaced by happiness for his senior. However, this made him even more determined, causing him to run back out immediately. Yet, he didn't spend even a day mourning his competition loss. Next up were the final exams. These were much harder than playing badminton. Taiki was still holding a math book on his way to the club, as there was simply no time to study at home. Unexpectedly, he ran into Hina, who was also half dead, holding an English book. Seeing someone else in the same boat, Taiki instantly felt relieved. They bickered as they walked to the gym, where they saw the women's basketball team training. After all, they had made it to the national competition. Chinatsu, the senior, shone brilliantly among them, prompting Taiki to put down his book and immediately start club activities. However, his friends Hina and Kyo could see his disappointment. The sense of loss from being eliminated was not easy to overcome, especially seeing Chinatsu advance to the nationals, likely making it even harder for him. Kyo told Hina that Taiki hadn't been interacting much with Chinatsu lately due to different schedules for exams and club activities. Nevertheless, Hina wasn't happy about this. She was just worried about Taiki's condition. Luckily, a senior member of the badminton team, Kengo, also made it to the nationals, preventing Sajikawa from monopolizing the spots. As the preliminaries came to an end, the coach asked the team members to write their goals on the wall to motivate themselves. Kyo wrote, "Resolute and decisive." Senior Nishida wrote, "Make it to the nationals," and Senior Kengo aimed for national champion. Surprisingly, Taiki only wrote, "Improve smash accuracy," without mentioning reaching the nationals. Chinatsu noticed this and found it somewhat odd. Days passed, and the finals approached. Taiki and his friends studied even as they walked, not neglecting club activities. One evening, while studying, Taiki suddenly sneezed and thought about resting. Just then, he realized it was late, and his senior was still not back, making him hesitant to go downstairs and face her. The final exams finally ended, and the badminton team suggested celebrating at a family restaurant. Taiki, feeling his cold worsening, declined. Once home, he collapsed into bed and couldn't get up, alone in the house. In such moments, Bad memories often resurfaced. Taiki's mind was filled with scenes of his recent loss in the match. He had been busy preparing for exams, suppressing his emotions, which all burst out after the exams, leaving him physically and mentally exhausted. However, he suddenly remembered Chinatsu's smiling face. Recalling their recent times together made him feel even more unsettled and unworthy. Just then, he heard Chinatsu's voice denying his thoughts. She turned on the light and touched Taiki's forehead, confirming he had a fever. Seeing her, Taiki's eyes lit up, but then he realized the risk of contagion and quickly backed away. Chinatsu told him to stop being overly sensitive and to rest properly. She then went to the kitchen and made him a bowl of steaming udon noodles. The thought of eating udon, made by Chinatsu, excited Taiki, but his blocked nose prevented him from tasting anything. Chinatsu sat beside him, ready to help if needed. With her by his side, Taiki felt much more at ease, and they hadn't been this close in a long time. Chinatsu said she would stay until he fell asleep, but her presence made it hard for him to sleep. She suggested they chat, noting they hadn't talked much recently. Taiki had wanted to ask her a question after the competition ended, but hadn't yet done so. But now, Taiki felt too embarrassed to ask. He just wanted to know what Chinatsu meant by her comment last time. Why did he feel envious seeing Hina eat? However, asking her after losing the match seemed pointless. So, Chinatsu asked him a question instead. Why hadn't he aimed to qualify for the national competition? Taiki explained that he lost points several times due to errors in his smashes during the match, suggesting that the nationals might still be out of his reach. Only after playing in official matches did he realize there were many players better than him, and merely wanting to win was not enough to achieve such a lofty goal. It might even be overambitious. Hearing her junior reflect this way, Chinatsu found it interesting. To harbor grand ambitions yet realistically assess one's current abilities was admirable. She thought highly of him. Chinatsu herself had also wondered if she was being overambitious or might not meet her goals. Such thoughts would transform into pressure, overwhelming her at times, even making her consider giving up for the sake of ease. Yet, she could never let go, always keeping the national competition in mind, which motivated her to be the first to train every morning. She didn't let the magnitude of her goals intimidate her. Instead, she turned her self-doubt into a driving force for effort. That was enough for her. The more Taiki listened, the more he admired such a cool senior, and he liked her even more for it. So he decided to add another line on paper tomorrow. Although he didn't specify, Chinatsu instantly understood his meaning. She lightly joked to ease the mood and prepared to tuck Taiki into bed. Taiki didn't want to trouble her, but as soon as he tried to get out of bed, his legs gave way. Chinatsu quickly stepped forward to support him, and they both ended up falling onto the bed in an all-too-familiar position. Taiki's heart pounded like a drum, while Chinatsu uncontrollably touched his face. This was definitely the most nervous moment in Taiki's life. His beloved senior was lying on top of him, reaching out to touch his face, but she was just fixing his fever-reducing patch. Then, as if nothing had happened, she got up and left, leaving Taiki too excited to sleep. Fortunately, his fever subsided by the next morning, and he went to his club activities as usual. Unable to stop thinking about his senior, he remembered the soft touch of her body from the night before and the scent of her shampoo. At school, he found the seniors cleaning the swimming pool because the volleyball team was using the gym for a practice match. Other club members came to spend time there. Senior Kengo asked Taiki to join in. Taiki was about to refuse when he saw Chinatsu's radiant smile and immediately offered to help. While changing his shoes, he noticed a foot chain identical to Chinatsu's. To avoid troubling her, he wore rubber shoes to cover it. Kengo told Taiki that his weakness wasn't spiking as he had performed poorly from the start in a previous match against Yusa, who was also a freshman and would be even stronger next year. Kengo advised Taiki to focus entirely on his efforts if he wanted to qualify for the nationals, noticing that Taiki had been looking listless. Kengo asked if Chinatsu felt the same way, but she hadn't heard their conversation and went to chat with friends after greeting them. Kengo then asked about Taiki's progress, and Taiki, showing both fear and uncontrollable joy, sought advice on how to tell if he had a chance with someone. Kengo pointed out that being able to talk naturally with Chinatsu didn't mean much as she was friendly with everyone. However, he also noted that Chinatsu wouldn't seek someone out without reason, indicating she had clear boundaries. Taiki immediately recalled the previous night's event, trying to convince himself that his senior was just helping with the fever patch and nothing more. The next moment, he saw Chinatsu drinking water, looking up, and despite telling himself not to hope, he couldn't help but feel excited. After cleaning the pool, the seniors couldn't wait to jump in and play. Since Taiki had just recovered from a cold, he chose not to join them. While putting things away in the equipment room, he ran into Chinatsu. Alone together, Taiki felt nervous. However, seeing Chinatsu's casual demeanor made him think he was being too gloomy. To show he didn't care, he deliberately brought up last night and thanked her. Chinatsu's expression seemed unnatural, and she said it was no problem. Taiki, unable to help himself, grabbed her wrist but quickly let go and made an excuse about asking where to place a bucket. After she left, he scolded himself for not being more careful, knowing he should have been. On the street, Chinatsu and her friend bumped into a classmate and her boyfriend. Her friend remarked how love had made the girl even cuter. They both were too busy with club activities to think about dating. Back at the gym, they found a volleyball player crying because she was transferring and the team hadn't made it to the nationals. It was a relief that Chinatsu stayed. Without her, their basketball team might also have struggled to reach the nationals. Her friends were grateful to the relatives who made Chinatsu feel at home and joked about how great it would be if there was a handsome guy in that family for Chinatsu to date, not knowing there really was one. That evening, Taiki's family was barbecuing in the yard. Chinatsu, joining in, felt happy. Seeing Taiki's dad cutting vegetables alone, she went to help. He told her to go eat outside and treat the place like her own home. Chinatsu replied that it was precisely because she felt at home that she couldn't just sit back like a guest, and started preparing the vegetables. With his busy work schedule, Taiki's dad rarely talked to Chinatsu, so this was a good opportunity. His family hoped she would feel comfortable living there, especially Taiki's mom, who had even promised to take responsibility. Taiki's dad had been persuaded that since it was Chinatsu's wish to stay, they as adults had a duty to support her. Later, learning she had made it to the nationals, they all felt proud. Chinatsu felt fortunate to be staying here. Just then, Taiki came in to get some noodles, but it turned out that his dad, who was in charge of shopping, hadn't bought them. Chinatsu mentioned she needed to buy some items herself and could go now. Taiki's dad suggested Taiki go with her, as it wasn't safe for a girl to walk alone at night. However, Taiki was still unsure about the proper distance to keep from his senior and said he could go alone. But when Chinatsu suggested they go together, Taiki couldn't refuse. The walk back was awkward because they had already talked about everything on the way there. While Taiki was struggling to think of something to say, Chinatsu suddenly asked if they could have ice pops now, despite planning to eat noodles later. She also considered whether it would be better to share with everyone since she bought for all. Taiki laughed at Chinatsu's childlike reasoning and handed her an ice pop, explaining that the rule at their barbecue was to freely enjoy what you want. Chinatsu happily accepted it, and they continued eating and chatting naturally. Chinatsu thought Taiki was like his mother, cheerful and generous. She felt she might be more like her father, harder to read. For instance, when she first discussed staying at Taiki's place, she thought her father would surely object. Instead, he simply said, "Is that so?" as if leaving the decision entirely up to Chinatsu. A car came by suddenly, and in a rush, Taiki pulled Chinatsu aside. The moment their bodies touched, both were deeply stirred and remembered the previous night. Regaining his composure, Taiki quickly stepped back and apologized. As he was about to walk away, Chinatsu suddenly brought up last night's incident, hoping Taiki would act as if it never happened. She blamed herself for not considering the implications of living with a boy and promised to be more careful in the future. Taiki was stunned. Did Chinatsu mean to set clear boundaries between them? It also seemed she had noticed his feelings. Taiki felt indescribable disappointment. He had intended to pursue her, but before he could even start, he felt defeated. With summer vacation approaching, he wasn't in high spirits. Hina thought his worries were about homework and suggested that after the club activities on Saturday, they all go to the library to study. Several classmates also expressed interest in joining. After making plans, the three headed back, only to see Chinatsu outside the window. However, when Chinatsu looked up, she only saw Hina and Kyo. The two asked Taiki what he was hiding. Not wanting to tell his friends he felt rejected by Chinatsu, he simply said he had gotten too close to her, which wasn't good for her. After being reminded by Chinatsu, Taiki didn't know what to do. Hina looked at Taiki, wondering what was going through his mind. Seeing the senior sister washing up early in the morning made Taiki feel awkward because he didn't know what to say. Leaving would seem unnatural. Chinatsu, with toothpaste still in her mouth, couldn't speak clearly. After rinsing, she asked Taiki again if he was going to a club activity since he had put his uniform back on. Taiki answered that he would go to the club in the morning and then go to the library with everyone to do homework in the afternoon. Chinatsu encouraged him, reacting naturally. It seemed that only Taiki was still concerned about that day's incident. In the afternoon, while supposed to be doing homework, Hina started dozing off and complained that the material in the textbook seemed unfamiliar. A boy nearby immediately began explaining it to her, knowing well that he liked Hina. Taiki had just realized this. It seemed that everyone was unknowingly harboring romantic feelings. Unfortunately for the others, Hina was completely focused on Taiki, and they even went to buy drinks together. They overheard some girls discussing the upcoming fireworks festival next week, making Taiki nostalgic. They had gone together when they were in the first year of junior high. It was then that Taiki and Hina started talking. A classmate had asked if anyone wanted to go to the fireworks festival, and thinking of the candy apples made Hina drool and eagerly raise her hand, accidentally hitting Taiki in the face, which sparked their friendship. However, on the day of the fireworks festival, Hina was late due to training. By the time she arrived, the fireworks had already started, and she couldn't find her classmates. The candy apples were sold out, leaving Hina in tears. She consoled herself that she had to endure until she achieved results in rhythmic gymnastics. The next moment, Taiki appeared with a candy apple, explaining that he was running errands and saw the last one, which he bought for Hina after seeing her drool that day. Their relationship quickly grew closer, and Hina started to show her feisty side to Taiki. Both reminisced about the past. As Taiki was about to leave, Hina gathered her courage and invited him to go to the fireworks festival again this year. Taiki agreed without hesitation. Just then, a girl came to deliver Taiki's phone, and he hurried off to answer a call, promising to talk more next time. On the way back, Hina and her friend saw the poster again. Her friend wanted to go, but Hina mentioned she had already made plans. Her friend realized everything. Going to the fireworks festival together was essentially a date. She was happy for Hina. Unknowingly, Chainatsu's National Competition Day is approaching. While discussing with her mom and senior sisters what to bring, Taiki was outside doing his homework. Suddenly, he heard his mom mention that there's a fireworks festival next weekend, and asked Chinatsu if she wanted to go. Taiki's ears perked up upon hearing that the senior sister was also attending the festival. Although he doesn't know how to wear a yukata, he couldn't help but look forward to it. However, he had already planned to go with Hina and everyone else. Yes, Taiki thought Hina had invited everyone and even planned to tell Kyo himself. Even during the summer vacation, Taiki attended club training every day. Despite always losing to senior Kengo, he felt Kengo was continuously improving. Thinking this, the gap between them would only widen. Just then, Kengo invited him to attend a university training session next week. Taiki, of course, took this great opportunity, even though it coincided with the fireworks festival. After making the arrangement, Taiki joyfully went to wash his hands and was seen by Hina, who bumped into him asking why he was laughing alone. Taiki told her about the training with senior Kengo, and that he was also looking forward to the fireworks festival. He casually asked Hina who else was coming. Hina froze, lacking the courage to say it was meant to be a date for two, and simply excused that she forgot to invite others. Taiki didn't think much of it and invited Kyo. Kyo also asked who else was going, and upon learning that Hina had first invited Taiki and hadn't invited others, he immediately realized it was intended to be a date between Hina and Taiki. Why not just say so, he thought, doubting Taiki would ever figure that out on his own. Meanwhile, Hina had no choice but to invite friends again, but having been turned down by them before, they went to invite others instead. Hina couldn't bring herself to tell Taiki it was supposed to be a date for two. On the other hand, Chainatsu's friends were also asking her about the fireworks festival. Their women's basketball team had already planned to go together, but a friend asked if they should invite some boys as well, suggesting it might spark some romantic feelings. Unfortunately, Chainatsu declined, feeling content with the current arrangement. Taiki and Hina ran into each other again, and in the end, it was just the two of them, plus Kyo, who went together. Nonetheless, the three of them have the best relationship. Of course, Hina knows that Taiki would prefer to go with senior Chinatsu. Taiki didn't deny this, but he knew it was impossible to go with her. With so many people at the fireworks festival, it would be bad if they were seen. Even if he invited Chinatsu, she would surely refuse. Mentioning this made Taiki feel upset. He thought that after months of interaction, he had gotten closer to her, but it seemed like a step back. Now, all he could do was try not to trouble her. One wrong step, and he might even be disliked. Consequently, Taiki now avoids Chinatsu at school. Hearing this, Hina felt uneasy. She wished Taiki would value her as he does others, even if he was afraid. This wasn't like him at all. Moving forward bravely is his attractive trait. Hina's face turned red as she spoke, and then she ran away, but her words comforted Taiki. On the weekend, Taiki went to the university with senior Kengo. Unexpectedly, Hyodo was also there because he would be attending this university next year and was participating in the training. The intensity of the university training was much higher than in high school, and even Kengo was struggling. Taiki looked towards senior Hyodo, who thought Taiki wanted his drink, but reminded him that he tends to exert too much force when nervous. Hyodo also pointed out that Taiki's right elbow posture was incorrect, then demonstrated the correct posture for Taiki, who tried it again and noticed a significant improvement. Hyodo turned out to be quite approachable, pointing out the issues he observed in Taiki, and mentioning that if Taiki continued this way, the 2 national competition spots next year would surely go to Kengo and Yusa. Taiki humbly accepted the advice, knowing he isn't at their level yet, but has set his goals and is more motivated now. Suddenly, he made a successful shot. Yodo appreciated the young man's spirit and his love for underdog victories. After the training, Taiki's legs were trembling. He was supposed to meet Kyo next, but then Kyo messaged him to say he had a fever and couldn't go to the fireworks festival. It seems that when it comes to assists, you can't beat Kyo. Now it turned out to be just Taiki and Hina on a date. Realizing this made Taiki increasingly uncomfortable, but Hina didn't say anything, and since it had been arranged in advance, he went to meet her anyway. In the crowd, he saw a girl with a hairstyle like Senior Chinatsu's and got excited, only to relax when she turned around, and it wasn't her. Passing by a candy apple stall, he remembered Hina loved them and bought 2. Just after he bought them, Hina's voice came from behind him. Turning around, Taiki was stunned to see Hina, dressed in a yukata and looking stunning. Summer vacation was almost over, but before school began, Chinatsu celebrated her 17th birthday. Early in the morning, she arrived at the gym where her teammates wished her a happy birthday and gifted her a deer-themed t-shirt. With her teammates, Chinatsu spent a joyful birthday. Seeing this, Kyo immediately asked Taiki about his plans. Taiki had known about his senior's birthday for weeks and had been choosing a gift. He wanted to make her happy without being too serious, especially since Chinatsu had been low in spirits after the national competition. Taiki was undecided, thinking Chinatsu might not enjoy a loud celebration. However, seeing her happy now, he decided to prepare a surprise for her that evening. Suddenly, a ball hit Taiki on the head. Clearly, Hina was creating an opportunity to talk to him. Feeling awkward, Taiki pulled Hina aside for a private chat. Hina teasingly asked if he had feelings for her, but Taiki wanted to discuss a confession. Although Hina told him not to rush his response, Taiki's heart was set on Chinatsu. Is that okay? Hina knew he liked Chinatsu and didn't want him to feel conflicted, so she reassured him. Even Kyo, who accidentally overheard their conversation, felt it was inappropriate. Meanwhile, Chinatsu had started her training. With the senior team captain having left, the coach was strict with Chinatsu, the new lead. After practice, the coach proposed that Chinatsu become the assistant captain. The team agreed, and Chinatsu was willing to take on the responsibility, but her friends noticed the pressure on her. Despite it being her birthday, Chinatsu was the last to leave the gym. On her way home, she received a call from her mother, who wished her a happy birthday and checked on her recent activities. Chinatsu shared that she had become the basketball team's assistant captain and wanted to work harder to avoid critical mistakes. She was still blaming herself for missing the last shot in a game and doubted her abilities. Her mother didn't directly address her doubts, but advised her to consider these issues only when truly necessary. When facing difficulties, think about how to overcome them, and remember it's okay to rely on others. Chinatsu felt her mood brighten and sent Taiki a message. Unexpectedly, the notification sound came from right behind her. Taiki quickly explained that he wasn't following her. It was just a coincidence. Suddenly, Chinatsu suggested going somewhere for a stroll. Taiki thought of a great place, and they took a tram to the seaside. As soon as they arrived, Taiki was about to warn Chinatsu about not going into the water when she had already kicked off her shoes and dashed into the sea, calling for Taiki to join her. It was then that Taiki noticed the ribbon on Chinatsu's ankle was missing. Chinatsu joked that it probably broke from carrying too many wishes, and it wasn't a match for Taiki's anymore. While Taiki pondered what she meant, Chinatsu started splashing water at him, and they joyfully played together. Onlookers on the shore, weary from their daily routines, felt nostalgic watching the vibrant young pair. However, they could tell the weather was about to change. Taiki suddenly grabbed Chinatsu's wrist, but before they could enjoy the moment, he stepped on a sharp shell and fell into the water. Soaked and unable to board the tram in their condition, Chinatsu didn't want to go home yet, so they decided to stay until their clothes dried. Seizing the moment, Taiki brought out a small cake he had been carrying from school, complete with candles indicating Chinatsu's age. As Chinatsu felt another step closer to adulthood, she asked about Taiki's birthday. They were just 2 years apart, which didn't matter to Taiki at all. He began singing the birthday song, and Chinatsu beamed her brightest smile of the day. Before she could blow out the candles, the sea breeze did it first. Unbothered, they shared the cake with forks. Then, Taiki brought up the ribbon, promising to make theirs a pair next year, when his would also break. Chinatsu felt comforted by his words. Suddenly, the coastal weather turned, and they ran to the station in heavy rain, hoping to catch the last train. Unfortunately, they found it was canceled due to a landslide caused by the storm. They found a motel with only one room left, meaning they would have to share a bed that night. Well, actually, they had separate bedding. Taiki called home to reassure his family, mentioning everyone was there. though it was just him and Chinatsu. After Taiki finished his call, Chinatsu came out of the bath wearing a yukata. Thinking about facing her like this tonight, Taiki worried he might lose control. Unexpectedly, Chinatsu wasn't interested in sleeping. She found a bunch of board games and playing cards in the room. Since it was a rare outing, she suggested they stay up all night playing games. Just then, a friend made a video call to wish her a happy birthday again. As the call connected, Taiki instinctively hid under the table. The friend felt Chinatsu had been lacking energy lately and wanted to encourage her, promising to share any responsibilities. They hoped their basketball team would improve. After the call, the friend noticed Chinatsu seemed more relaxed compared to her somber demeanor during practice. Noticing the yukata, the friend asked about it. Chinatsu explained she was at a motel with her family, playing along to cover the actual situation. Her friend was happy for her, especially since Chinatsu had regretted not wearing a yukata during the fireworks festival. Eavesdropping, Taiki also felt fortunate to see Chinatsu in a yukata. When it seemed they were about to end the call, Taiki stood up, accidentally hitting his head on the table and knocking over a water cup. He exclaimed and caught the cup, but the friend heard a man's voice and wondered about it, thinking it might be the uncle of the host family. Since they mentioned the fireworks festival, Taiki took this chance to apologize to Chinatsu. He had previously promised to go to the festival with everyone, but only he and Hina ended up attending, which sounded suspicious to Chinatsu. She reassured him that no apology was needed. Furthermore, Chinatsu wanted Taiki's forgiveness for something she had said earlier about setting boundaries, which she now regretted as disrespectful. Taiki quickly assured her that no apology was necessary, and they were even. They then happily played cards. The next morning, Chinatsu woke up in bed and found Taiki still in the chair, apparently having spent the whole night there without getting into bed. His head had drooped to one side as he slept. Chinatsu tilted her head and couldn't help but laugh. Today was the first day of her 17th year. Today is the first day of the new semester. Taiki and Chinatsu got up early, and they couldn't help but act silly together. Taiki felt that ever since they returned from the seaside, the distance between him and senior Chinatsu had disappeared. The first major event of the new semester is the cultural festival, and Taiki's class is performing the play Snow White, with class beauty Hina as the lead. Taiki, as the class representative, was tasked by Hina to lead them well. Although they were just talking about the festival, Kyo noticed something off about their atmosphere. When a classmate asked Taiki to pass a list to the seniors, Kyo didn't waste any time and directly asked Hina if she had confessed to Taiki. Hina's reaction said it all, prompting Kyo to remind her that Taiki still had feelings for Chinatsu and they were living together. Hina didn't mind, as she had realized her feelings for Taiki. Meanwhile, Taiki went to the second-year classroom and found only Chinatsu there, as everyone else was preparing for the festival. Chinatsu invited him to sit, offering to pass on the list later. Surprisingly, her seat was at the back by the window, right next to where Taiki sat in his own classroom. They couldn't help but imagine what it would be like if they were classmates of the same grade. Taiki seemed like the type who would fall asleep in class, and when called upon, he would be clueless, unless Chinatsu showed him the answer. Just as they were enjoying this fantasy, the coach arrived, breaking the spell. Taiki hurriedly said goodbye, wishing he could be in the same class as Chinatsu. Although they are in different grades and clubs, seeing each other only across the net, living together brought them closer. If they hadn't been living together, they probably wouldn't even speak much. When Taiki got home that day, he was greeted by Chinatsu's mother. It turned out that Chinatsu's grandfather had fallen ill, and her mother had rushed back by plane. Although he was stable, he needed surgery next month. It wasn't feasible for both mother and daughter to stay at Taiki's, so Chinatsu's mom rented an apartment. Chinatsu would be moving there to stay with her mother for a while. Hearing this, Taiki felt heartbroken but could only help with the move, and Chinatsu even returned the keys to him. Before leaving, Taiki and Chinatsu briefly chatted. Taiki learned that the women's basketball team was soon having a practice match with another school, and Chinatsu would be practicing hard. They agreed to meet at morning practice the next day, which slightly lifted Taiki's spirits. After all, they could chat during practice. However, the next morning, Taiki arrived at the sports field to find nobody there. Shortly after, Senior Kengo arrived and took Taiki off for a morning run and physical training, leaving no chance for him to see Chinatsu. Later that day, as the class representative, Taiki had a meeting to discuss the cultural festival and was relieved to see Chinatsu there, easing his worries. However, he realized that without random encounters at the gym or school, he wouldn't even know if Chinatsu attended school. During the meeting, Chinatsu briefly made eye contact with Taiki, but before they could speak, she was distracted by classmates. Back home, Taiki considered the possibility of skipping a grade to be with Chinatsu, although his grades made this unlikely. Thankfully, he could see her after school at club practice, but before he could speak to her, the basketball team had already left. With club activities and the cultural festival keeping him busy, morning physical training with Kengo, and not seeing Chinatsu, Taiki was feeling quite down. Thinking this might become the new normal made him feel even worse. Surprisingly, when he got home, Chinatsu was there to pick up something she forgot. She immediately questioned why Taiki hadn't been at morning practice. Taiki quickly explained, and Chinatsu revealed she had taken the wrong train and ran to the sports field, only to find Taiki missing. They agreed to meet again the next day. Meanwhile, Hina's drama practice was not going smoothly, often forgetting her lines, but she still performed convincingly. Kyo, while making costumes, remarked that standing confidently in front of others is a talent in itself. Although Taiki wasn't performing, he was managing all aspects of the event. When he left to continue his tasks, several girls praised his competence and approachability, highlighting his strengths. Hina felt very reassured by this. Taiki later bumped into Chinatsu at the snack bar and learned her class was setting up a cafe with carefully chosen waitress uniforms. He imagined Chinatsu in a maid outfit, but unfortunately, as the class representative, she wouldn't be serving customers, which Taiki found disappointing. Just then, Hina and a few female classmates came over to tell Taiki that a teacher was looking for him. Chinatsu then said goodbye and walked away. That evening, she watched a TV drama with her mother, which featured a complicated love triangle where a girl secretly loved a male colleague, but another female colleague who knew about it went on a business trip with him. It wasn't the trip that was important, but the ambiguous attitude of the female colleague. Her mother remarked that the colleague was cunning, using work as an excuse to silence any objections, and probably pretending at other times. She added that if there was truly no interest, one should maintain a distance. Chinatsu felt uneasy hearing this. She was in a similar position, knowing Hina liked Taiki, but still spending time with him at the beach, and even feeling a bit happy to hear they weren't dating. The next day, after a busy day, Taiki rushed to the gym where a senior lectured him on the importance of making the most of limited time, especially when carrying responsibilities. Surprisingly, the usually carefree senior spoke profoundly. However, before Taiki could be touched by the words, other seniors revealed that he was just showing off as the acting captain. Despite this, Taiki found some comfort, as lately, middle school students had been coming to him for advice on badminton. By chance, Chinatsu saw one such moment and teasingly called him senior, like the middle schooler had. They joked around, with Taiki standing on tiptoes claiming he could grow taller, only for Chinatsu to pull him down by his clothes, saying he was tall enough, and then running off laughing. Though closer in height to her now, Taiki, as a boy, still wished he could be taller. Meanwhile, Hina was alone, struggling with her lines, and when Kyo passed by, he gave her a few tips. Hina asked why Kyo didn't take a role, and he expressed his dislike for romantic dramas, where the heroine suffers only to marry a prince who appears suddenly, finding it unrealistic. Unexpectedly, Kyo, a boy, viewed it from a girl's perspective. Curious, Hina asked if he had someone he liked. Kyo pictured a girl in his mind, but said he didn't have anyone currently because that girl had a boyfriend. Seeing Hina still pursuing Taiki, knowing he liked someone else, Kyo felt pity and admiration, but as Taiki was his good friend, he wouldn't support Hina's pursuit. After talking with Kyo, Hina was called by a classmate to help with copying a document. In the copy room, she unexpectedly met Chinatsu and took the opportunity to tell her directly that she had confessed to Taiki. Seizing a moment alone with senior Chinatsu, Hina couldn't wait to tell her she had confessed to Taiki. Although surprised, Chinatsu had little to say. Hina quickly explained that since Taiki and Chinatsu were living together, she thought it best to inform her first, with no other intentions. Chinatsu took the opportunity to clarify that she had moved out of Taiki's place and would be living elsewhere for a month. Hina was visibly delighted and wished Chinatsu's grandfather a speedy recovery before happily leaving. Meanwhile, Chinatsu was left deep in thought. On the other hand, under relentless training, Taiki's skills were improving, earning praise from his seniors. However, this only made him more restless. The coach gathered the team to announce a practice match on Saturday against Sachi River High School. The thought of Yusa, who had previously beaten them, loomed in Taiki's mind. Even senior Kengo had been eager for a rematch, increasing Taiki's nerves, prompting him to train even harder. Meanwhile, Hina memorized her lines while running with Taiki, not missing a chance to be with him. Learning of his Saturday match, She promised to cheer him on, especially against an opponent who had once defeated him. Planning to scream in support, Hina also looked forward to seeing her crush's efforts. Hearing the term crush, Taiki blushed, followed by an even shyer Hina, and the two flirted again. The next morning, Chinatsu arrived at school to find Taiki training alone. Watching her junior's efforts, she felt reassured, knowing his focus was on the upcoming match. She mentioned she'd come to watch after her own training on Saturday, making Taiki even more nervous. Despite his instinct to refuse, Chinatsu insisted on watching, recalling Hina's words, stirring his emotions. However, Chinatsu simply wanted to watch her morning training partner. As days passed, Taiki's affection for Chinatsu grew. Even during study sessions, he watched the girls' basketball team train outside, unaware that Hina was also watching him intently. After days of intense training, Taiki became much stronger, surpassing other freshmen. Yet, he remained unsatisfied, especially upon hearing that Yusa had defeated a professional Japanese player. Being so accomplished as a freshman, Yusa seemed like a monster. Driven, Taiki sought extra matches with his teammates. The captain, noticing this, sent Kengo to give the overzealous junior some tough love. Kengo, confident in Taiki's ambition, knew he wouldn't settle for easy wins and truly aimed to surpass Yusa. The captain suggested Kengo share some senior wisdom, though Kengo wasn't the type to go easy on him. As the cultural festival approached, students became busier. Hina was constantly rehearsing in the classroom. Curious if she needed help, Taiki opened the door to find her lying on the table as if dead, merely practicing her final scene. Unsure of the right expression, Hina welcomed Taiki's offer to practice with her. Surprisingly, the script called for a kiss. This made both of them blush. The scene depicted Snow White reviving from a poisoned apple, and Taiki imagined the thrill of waking up to a prince. Hina, imagining a kiss with Prince Taiki, felt a chill and decided to keep pondering her role alone. Taiki admired her dedication to embodying the character and her effort to understand the psychological motives, praising her acting skills. Their mutual admiration led to a conversation where Hina also praised Taiki as a master of time management, balancing club training and festival preparations. Embarrassed by their compliments, Hina quickly asked Taiki to help her rehearse, then lay back down. As Taiki read the narration, he reached the line, "You have been kissed," to which Hina showed no reaction. Checking if she was asleep, he found Hina covering her eyes, her face flushed, admitting she had vividly imagined him kissing her. Shocked, Taiki dropped the script. Seeing Hina's expression and recalling the script's kiss, he wondered if there was a momentary spark. When Hina suddenly asked if he wanted to kiss, Taiki hesitated but firmly answered, no. Although Hina wasn't surprised, she still felt a sense of loss. She quickly put on a confident face and asked Taiki if he had felt a flutter in his heart just now, revealing that it was part of her strategy before she hastily fled. Inside, Taiki criticized himself, recalling the words Hina had spoken to him recently. As the Saturday practice match approached, Taiki played against Kengo and lost 2 games in a row. Even though he could win against others, the gap between him and senior Kengo seemed to widen. Kengo, unable to watch, told Taiki that playing badminton with someone lacking confidence was useless to him. Taiki felt it wasn't a lack of confidence. Rather, the excellence of Hina and Chinatsu made him feel inferior. Hearing that a class was serving curry, the captain immediately led the team to have some. They passed by Chinatsu, who stayed to help with the cultural festival preparations. Kengo truly admired her for balancing club activities and class duties, always being the first at the training ground. He noted that Chinatsu mentioned Taiki also arrived early, but felt the two were different. If Chinatsu was a sadist, then Taiki was a masochist, focused solely on his shortcomings, unable to praise himself. Despite not needing to make things so hard for himself, like walking in a desert without water, he did exactly that, taking his challenges too seriously and forgetting to hydrate himself. Chinatsu could understand Taiki's urgency as they both hated stagnation. So, she asked Kengo to help hydrate their junior. Despite his complaints, Kengo, acting more kindly than his words suggested, bought a drink before heading to the training ground. To his surprise, he found Taiki eating curry. Originally planning to train with him, Kengo decided to let him find Kyo instead. On Saturday, the badminton team had gathered. Taiki went to find the coach, but was distracted by thoughts of romance, feeling useless. He felt the same about Hina's confession. Although she said she didn't need an immediate response, he still hadn't decided what to do. His training was similarly unprogressive. Meanwhile, his rival Yusa had already arrived. Taiki's school is finally starting their practice match against Sajikawa. Yusa is the center of attention, as he outclasses the sophomores effortlessly and plans to sleep right after to be in top form against Kengo. But first, he encounters his old rival Taiki, whom Yusa doesn't remember having defeated in a major competition, recognizing him only as the person who just gave him directions. As soon as their match begins, Chinatsu and Hina come to watch, their emotions fluctuating with the score. Whenever Taiki scores, Chinatsu can't help but cheer, which makes her friend suspicious, noting the familiarity of Taiki's voice. Her friend asks if Chinatsu was with him on her birthday, suggesting they might be dating. Chinatsu denies it, then confesses to her friend about her visits to Taiki's house. Angered, her friend calls her foolish, questioning the appropriateness of staying at a boy's house, warning of potential issues. Memories of her time with Taiki flood Chinatsu's mind, but she firmly denies anything happened, though her friend remains skeptical. On the court, Taiki's situation worsens, with Kengo adding pressure, actually hoping to push Taiki to excel. As the score gap widens, Taiki is distracted by past losses and Hina's confession. His play becomes increasingly erratic, noticeable even to novices like Chinatsu, but she believes in him, confident he'll manage as long as he can move. Meanwhile, Taiki thinks of Chinatsu, reflecting on his unrequited love and self-doubt, despite his happiness over Hina's confession. Yusa wins the first set 21 points and leads the second. Taiki looks exhausted, and Hina sees his fatigue for the first time, worrying about him. His seniors feel the same, but Chinatsu understands something Taiki once said. Standing alone on the badminton court means bearing all responsibilities alone. No one knows better than her how hard Taiki works. Just as he watches her silently, Chinatsu also watches him from afar, hoping for his victory. Fortunately, Taiki had regained his composure by then, and his speed gradually increased. He quickly turned the game around, encouraged by his teammates' cheers, and finally won the second set. The decisive third set was next, with a revitalized Taiki facing a weary Yusa. The scores were close, and Sajikawa's players noticed the emerging talent in Taiki, anticipating another competitor in next year's national competition. Yet, Yusa seemed to enjoy the challenge more and more. Both players focused intensely, concentrating all their attention on the shuttlecock. In the end, Taiki turned defeat into victory, winning the match and redeeming himself. After the game, Hina ran off with a flushed face, clearly smitten by Taiki's performance. Yusa, unhappy with the loss, insisted on a rematch, but Kengo stopped him since they had to play each other next. Taiki went outside to wash up, only then feeling utterly exhausted, but internally very happy. Just as he was about to lie down, Chinatsu came to deliver some comfort items, asking him to choose between the left or right. Taiki chose the right, and Chinatsu claimed she had infused that bottle of water with the power of a spike. Seeing such a playful side of Chinatsu, Taiki found himself liking her even more, crediting his win to her inspiration, as seeing her train so early every day had motivated him. Meanwhile, the light music club practiced for the cultural festival nearby, and Chinatsu couldn't help but hum along, revealing her surprisingly tone-deaf singing. Taiki teased her about this, mentioning that Hina was a good singer. Remembering Hina had watched the game, Taiki suddenly recalled the moment she kissed him, which distracted him greatly. Thankfully, Chinatsu shifted the topic, asking about his preparations for the cultural festival, saying she would attend. But now, even mentioning a kiss triggered Taiki, who quickly excused himself and left. As Sajikawa's team prepared to leave, Yusa called out to Taiki, asking for his name and taking note of it, indicating their next encounter would be in an official match. Kengo was left in the gym in a bad mood, having just lost to Yusa. Once home, Taiki fell into a deep sleep, dreaming of an official match against Yusa, where he won with a decisive advantage, and Yusa conceded defeat. Then, Chinatsu, his senior, presented him with a prize, which included a bottle of water and a kiss. Just as they were about to kiss, Hina pulled him away and took the lead with a kiss. Waking from the dream, Taiki was embarrassed by his own thoughts. The cultural festival was finally approaching. Hina dressed up as Snow White, stunning everyone. Returning to the classroom from the office, Taiki was warned by classmates to brace himself before entering. Upon opening the door and seeing Hina in her Snow White dress, he could hardly look directly at her, but managed a compliment, noting she looked pretty good, which made a blushing Hina flee. A friend noticed Taiki wasn't completely oblivious, suggesting the cultural festival would be interesting. The next morning, Taiki put on his sports gear, as the gym was unavailable during the festival, and decided to go for a morning run. Unexpectedly, he met Chinatsu at the park's basketball court, realizing they both had the same idea. Motivated by his recent match, Taiki was full of energy, while Chinatsu was inspired by his performance. After shooting a basket, Chinatsu told Taiki that the band they heard before was from the second year, and they would perform at 2 p.m., asking if he'd like to join her. Taiki couldn't refuse, so they agreed to meet at 2 p.m. The much-anticipated cultural festival had begun, with their class's performance scheduled for 3:30 p.m. In the morning, everyone focused on enjoying the festival. After parting with Kyo, Taiki was looking for something to do when he bumped into a guy with a mohawk who had heard about Taiki's victory over Yusa and insisted on a rematch. When Taiki refused, the mohawk guy changed his request, asking to be taken to Chinatsu's class. They argued in the hallway, but just then, Kengo and Hanako passed by, heading to find Chinatsu, and took both the mohawk guy and Taiki with them. Chinatsu's class was running a maid cafe, mostly filled with male students, eager not to miss such a scene. Chinatsu, dressed as a maid, shone in everyone's eyes. The mohawk guy was overwhelmed on the spot, and Taiki was nearly at his limit, teased by Kengo for being too young. At the cafe, some guys were harassing Chinatsu, persistently asking for her contact information. Taiki was about to step in when Chinatsu's friend slammed the table, fully asserting herself. She declared their cafe wasn't that kind of place, asking the men not to pursue Chinatsu. She joked that she and Chinatsu were like an old married couple, which easily led to misunderstandings. The mohawk guy thought she was Chinatsu's boyfriend and began to drown his sorrows in orange juice. However, he soon resolved that as long as Chinatsu was happy, that was enough for him, and he downed his orange juice in one go. But Taiki was more selfish. He wanted to be the one by Chinatsu's side. Just then, Chinatsu approached him about a fashion show at 2 p.m. that Hanako wanted to watch with her. Without hesitation, Chinatsu said she already had plans, which Taiki knew meant attending the concert with him. Excited, he hurried out and waited at the concert venue just before 2 p.m. When Chinatsu didn't show, he thought she might have gone inside. The concert had already started, but he couldn't find Chinatsu. Feeling disappointed, Chinatsu suddenly grabbed his wrist, explaining she was late because her replacement hadn't arrived. Taiki was just relieved and couldn't help but gaze at her face. Trying to make conversation, he mentioned it was his first time at such a performance. But the atmosphere was so loud that Chinatsu couldn't hear him, and she responded with hand gestures. Taiki leaned in closer, and Chinatsu smiled and agreed with him, making his heart skip a beat. With joyful music in the background, all he could think of was Chinatsu's smiling face. During their favorite song, Taiki couldn't help asking why she had invited him. Chinatsu leaned in to whisper something in his ear, but just then, the guitar got louder, and he heard nothing. Chinatsu lacked the courage to repeat it, leaving Taiki hanging for the rest of the concert. On the way back, he wanted to ask again, but was interrupted as Chinatsu mentioned she would attend their class's performance at 3:30 p.m. After parting with Chinatsu, Taiki felt overwhelmingly happy. Suddenly, a senior reading fortunes called him over, predicting that he would soon face an unprecedented challenge. Taiki didn't believe it until a group of previous clients praised the senior's accuracy. Skeptically, Taiki returned to the prep room, only to learn that the boy playing the prince had been hospitalized. They urgently needed a replacement, so Taiki, just back from outside, was quickly pulled in to fill the role. Taiki couldn't refuse, so to not waste everyone's effort, he reluctantly put on the costume. He looked back at Hina, whose eyes were filled with complex emotions, making it impossible for him to say no. He immediately started memorizing his lines. Thankfully, having seen many rehearsals, he should remember most of them, but as he opened the script, he felt dizzy. Was this the challenge the senior had mentioned? The lines were manageable, but the kissing scene at the end was the real issue. Although it was just for show, Hina's previous advance made it impossible for him not to care, and remembering Chinatsu would be watching made it even harder. As the play was about to start, Chinatsu arrived at the theater as promised. Hanako and others had saved seats right in the middle. Taiki had messaged Chinatsu in advance to explain he was playing the lead role. The seniors regretted not bringing a camera. Before going on stage, everyone encouraged Taiki, but now, every time he closed his eyes, he could see Hina covering her eyes, imagining him kissing her. Noticed by Hina, she kneed him lightly, telling him not to be too nervous. Though she hadn't expected to end up acting opposite Taiki, since they had rehearsed so long, she was determined to perform her role well. Hina's teasing actually relaxed Taiki quite a bit. When Kyo entered and saw this, classmates speculated if they were dating. Kyo, knowing better, clarified they were just friends, but then wondered, what really is the difference between friends and lovers? Soon the announcer started the opening speech, and the new adaptation of Snow White began. Hina, playing Snow White, immediately captured all the attention. Prince Taiki followed, visibly stiff. The script had been changed to have the prince and princess meet earlier, because Kyo had criticized the idea of marrying a man who just appears. This led to a plot where Snow White falls in love with the prince first, and is eventually awakened by a kiss from her beloved. The script was well received, though some found the glorified portrayal of enduring love a bit heavy, arguing romance should be lighter. Unnoticed, the play progressed to Snow White eating the poisoned apple, and Taiki was still preparing for the kissing scene. Another boy, working backstage, pondered Kyo's question about the difference between friends and lovers. The conclusion was, it's about whether you can kiss, whether you want to cross that line of friendship. Kyo's gaze shifted to Taiki, wondering by that standard. At the climax of the play, the prince was to kiss Snow White. Taiki used his cloak to shield them, just pretending to kiss as he leaned in. The princess immediately sat up, waking from her slumber. They only needed to finish the final dialogue to end the play. But just then, a golden ball suddenly fell from above the stage. In a panic, Taiki dove to protect Hina and was hit by the ball. His head unintentionally came close to hers, and though a cascade of confetti obscured them, everyone believed they had kissed. The play was temporarily halted by the accident, and the audience began speculating if the prince and princess were actually dating. Chinatsu felt the most conflicted at that moment. Afterward, Taiki kept explaining to others that he and Hina hadn't really kissed, but when others asked Hina, she simply said, "That's right," which made them even more skeptical. The discussion about whether they were dating continued in front of them. Hina didn't object, but Taiki got somewhat angry, reiterating that although it looked like a kiss, he disliked being gossiped about. The classmates finally silenced. Hina realized he was upset and quickly apologized, praising his performance and offering to tell Chinatsu they hadn't kissed if needed. Taiki was about to clarify, he didn't mean that when Hina ran off, leaving him to vent to Kyo. He knew his relationship with Hina was delicate and hated the scrutiny, feeling it must also bother Hina, yet it seemed he was the only one upset. Kyo, seeing through everything, directly asked if he really had no romantic feelings for Hina. Taiki was momentarily speechless, his mind flashing through various moments, but he firmly responded, "I like Chinatsu." Even if his heart held only Chinatsu, could there also be a part that cared about Hina? Struggling with these emotional issues, Taiki felt a headache coming on, but Kyo reminded him that even with a headache, he needed to think it through, as he couldn't keep them both hanging. The cultural festival ended successfully. The next morning, Taiki made himself a coffee and whimsically added 3 layers of milk, which made it much tastier. So, can feelings for two people coexist? Before he could figure it out, Chinatsu was moving back in. Taiki was still pondering over what Kyo had said when he turned around and saw Chinatsu. Her grandfather's surgery had gone well, and she would continue to stay here from tomorrow, spending tonight at Hanako's house. Chinatsu acted as usual, not mentioning anything about Taiki kissing Hina, making him think she hadn't seen the performance. Just as he was about to ask, Chinatsu kept stuffing snacks into his mouth to stop him from speaking. When Taiki returned to school, rumors about the kiss hadn't died down yet. Only Nishida, a senior on the badminton team, believed him. Taiki learned from Nishida that he had gone to the performance with Chinatsu. The story was also spreading among the seniors because Hina was quite well known at their school. Unable to help himself, Taiki stared at Hina, and sure enough, he was charged a viewing fee. She was too cute and pretty for him, making Nishida even less likely to believe the rumors. Chinatsu's friends noticed the interactions and knew she was staying at that boy's house. One friend, curious about Chinatsu's thoughts, decided to ask her, but Chinatsu was busy playing basketball and seemed not to care. That evening, Chinatsu arrived at Hanako's house. It had been a long time since they had slept together. Hanako complained about Kengo being busy with club activities and contacting her less frequently. Chinatsu knew that if Kengo really prioritized his girlfriend over everything else, Hanako would get angry. As they chatted, they began to cuddle, and Hanako felt she needed to protect her naive friend from any pests. However, she had an out-of-school friend who wanted to meet Chinatsu and asked if she could give him her contact information. Chinatsu immediately refused, not interested in dealing with strangers. Hanako couldn't help but remark that Chinatsu really had no interest in romance. Everyone in kindergarten wanted to marry the teacher except for Chinatsu, who was busy playing with balls. Chinatsu admitted she was a bit slower than others in noticing such feelings. Hanako guessed there was someone Chinatsu cared about, even guessing it was Taiki. Unable to lie, Chinatsu admitted it, but didn't think it was to the extent of liking him yet. Perhaps just a budding interest. Initially, she just thought he was an ordinary boy during their morning practices. Over time, after getting to know him better, she found him to be a decent person, and the bud started to grow. However, she was usually too busy playing basketball to nurture it, and the incident at the cultural festival had scared her a bit. Hanako, with her years of dating experience, understood immediately. However, if it were her, she would have nipped the bud right away upon witnessing such an incident, as spreading such rumors was bizarre in itself. But Chinatsu was a serious person, and the pace of love varies from person to person, so Hanako believed Chinatsu's claim that it hadn't reached the stage of liking yet was true. However, she warned that if Chinatsu continued to hesitate, someone else might step in. Ultimately, Hanako hoped that Chinatsu would experience a happy relationship and find her missing puzzle piece. She wished her own sister, Ayame, could learn from Chinatsu. Ayame, also a student at Chinatsu's school, had been in countless relationships, breaking up over trivial issues and quickly moving on to the next person. She had her eyes on a handsome guy this time. The next day, Chinatsu officially moved back to Taiki's house. Despite the rumors about him and Hina, Taiki didn't keep his distance from her. Seeing them flirt made others more convinced of their relationship. Hina playfully used this to tease Taiki, but he knew it was her unique way of showing care. Only Kyo saw through this but kept it to himself. Then, the coach gathered the team members to announce a new addition to the club, none other than Ayame, who would be the female manager. The team members were ecstatic to have such a cute manager. However, Ayame's interest wasn't in them. She had fallen for Yusa during a previous badminton match and joined the team to pursue him, only to find out he was from another school. This left her so upset she wanted to quit immediately. But Kengo, as her sister's boyfriend, stopped her. He knew what kind of girl she was, but the badminton club wasn't a place to come and go as one pleases. Ayame reluctantly stayed, tears in her eyes. The coach asked Taiki to help her get acquainted with her duties. As soon as they entered the messy, smelly activity room, Ayame pinched her nose, more worried than ever about her future, and when she picked up a towel and found a large spider on the floor, she was so frightened that she jumped onto Taiki. Chinatsu happened to walk in on this scene. Ayame immediately abandoned Taiki and jumped into Chinatsu's arms when she saw a spider running towards them. She quickly pushed Taiki to deal with it. Chinatsu noticed their close interaction and felt a twinge of jealousy. She then grabbed a tissue, picked up the spider, and threw it outside. Surprisingly, her romantic feelings seemed to give her courage against bugs. Only then did she learn that Ayame had become the manager of the badminton team. Although Ayame didn't seem interested in Taiki, Chinatsu still felt conflicted. Unbeknownst to her, Ayame had already gotten used to the responsibilities of the badminton team. While fetching water, she encountered Hina, who immediately noticed Ayame's prominent chest and felt threatened. Back at work, Ayame approached Taiki to learn more about her duties. Taiki bluntly told her she was standing too close, warning that rumors could spread and it was better to maintain some distance. "You're quite the hypocrite," Ayame realized, recognizing him as the prince from the play and aware of his troubles with rumors. She comforted Taiki, saying, "It's just a kiss. People are making too big a deal out of it. Just ignore everything except what people who really care about you say." She promised to keep her distance, but the next second, she saw another spider and instinctively moved closer to Taiki again. Chinatsu witnessed this scene. Ayame began asking her sister about Chinatsu's love life after noticing several people interested in Chinatsu during her few days on the badminton team. Hanako responded with silence, which led Ayame to guess that Chinatsu might be interested in someone. Ayame started speculating about who it could be, assuming only someone very exceptional could match Chinatsu. Hanako, trying to distract her sister, mentioned that Chinatsu had once liked a basketball player, setting him as the standard. Tall, good at basketball, older and handsome, currently abroad. Unexpectedly, there really was someone like that at the sports field. Matsuoka, a tall and handsome sophomore who had just returned from abroad. Ayame immediately decided he must be Chinatsu's crush, noting they looked perfect together. Then Taiki came over, handed a form to Ayame, and noticed a new face, but didn't pay much attention. Soon after, Hina entered, and Taiki struck up a conversation with her. Ayame, experienced in these matters, saw Hina's expression and knew she had feelings for Taiki. She directly asked Hina, and Hina's excited reaction confirmed it. Ayame assured her that Taiki wasn't her type, but still wanted to help Hina make a move, believing that proactive girls like her usually succeed. However, it turned out Taiki had already been confessed to, but had asked for time to think. Ayame grew increasingly convinced of Taiki's dubious character, seeing him as taking advantage of Hina's feelings. Despite this, Hina said she was happy just liking him. Ayame couldn't understand, but was determined to help Hina achieve her romantic dreams, as she always supported those who strive hard. Later, Chinatsu encountered Taiki on the street and hesitantly called him by the nickname Ayame had given him. Taiki asked her not to, saying it made him shy and suggesting she might dislike it if he used a nickname for her. Surprisingly, Chinatsu was okay with it, even saying he could call her by her first name. When she got home and saw Taiki's mother, she instinctively hid the cactus she was carrying behind her back, then secretly kept it on her room's balcony, hoping it would bloom one day. Several sports clubs are planning a joint training camp soon, lasting 4 days and 3 nights. Ayame, enthusiastic upon hearing this, plans to use the opportunity to help Chinatsu and senior Matsuoka get closer, and to also set up Hina with Taiki. Returning to the badminton courts in high spirits, she finds Taiki impressively playing a practice match. Although a senior mentioned he was the strongest freshman and had beaten Yusa, Ayame, a fan of Yusa, refused to believe it, assuming Yusa must have been handicapped during their match. Meanwhile, Taiki feels his performance has been improving, but senior Kengo is reluctant to play against him. As Ayame drags him to get shuttlecocks, their departure is noticed by Chinatsu, who inadvertently starts daydreaming. Matsuoka teases her a bit, seeing them chatting happily. On her way, Ayame encounters many acquaintances, all her ex-boyfriends with whom she parted on good terms. Ayame tends to date anyone who expresses interest in her, unless she's completely uninterested, hoping to grow to like them after starting a relationship. She finds this approach more efficient than trying to get noticed by someone she likes. Ayame hopes to hint to Taiki to pursue Hina, as Taiki acknowledges that being confessed to does make him pay more attention to the person. Ayame feels optimistic about their chances. Meanwhile, Chinatsu, resting with her teammates, hears about a campfire on the last night of the camp that supposedly helps spark romances. Anyone confessing during this event is likely to start a fiery romance. This leaves Chinatsu pensive. Finally, on the day of the camp, everyone boards a bus to the mountains for 4 days of intense training. Each day feels like hell, with the badminton team training indoors. Taiki opens the door to get some air and sees the basketball team, including the popular Chinatsu, chatting with a handsome guy, still running outside. Only the rhythmic gymnastics team has it slightly easier, going straight to the gym by car. After a brief chat, Ayame reminds them that their break is over, and training resumes, almost non-stop. Despite the exhaustive schedule, Taiki still attempts to challenge Kengo to a practice match, but Kengo refuses. Fortunately, the evenings allowed for a relaxing bath, and just as Taiki stepped out, he saw several girls from the neighboring room. He suddenly remembered Chinatsu's first impression and hated the thought of anyone seeing her like that. While he was conflicted, Hina, fresh from her bath with her hair down, approached. Though they had only been apart for a day, it felt much longer due to the day's length. Taiki was about to go rest when a senior nearby excitedly suggested that the night had just begun and they should play games. Hearing this, Ayame eagerly appeared. Chinatsu and her friend passing by were also pulled into the group. Everyone headed to Kengo's room to play the king game. Each person drew a card, with those drawing swords having to draw the king card. Surprisingly, the challenge was to add meow to the end of each sentence. Everyone watched stoic Kyo, who accepted the challenge with ease, declaring, "Being shy means losing. Meow." Next, it was Chinatsu's turn to draw the king card. Everyone hoped she would get the meow task, but her challenge was to have someone style her hair. The girls quickly took to the task, transforming Chinatsu's appearance, which Kengo captured and shared with his girlfriend. The atmosphere grew warmer. Meanwhile, Ayame noticed a dent on a follower card and planned to use it to control the game. She intentionally handed that card to Taiki, having seen that the next command was to make eye contact with the person on the left for 7 seconds. Hina was on Taiki's left. Just as they were prepared for this intimate challenge, the senior habitually shuffled the deck and drew a new card for Taiki. Unexpectedly, it was even more explosive than what Ayame had planned. It was to loudly declare love for someone he liked. Now the question was, to whom would Taiki declare his love? Who is Taiki planning to confess to? Before anyone could get an answer, Kyo jumped in to help. He mentioned Yusa, speaking of a dream Taiki had on the bus about how fast Yusa serves in volleyball. He suggested a love triangle involving Ayame. Ayame caught on to Kyo's hint and smoothly moved past the topic. On the way back to his room, Kyo told Taiki that no one really expected a serious answer from him. But did he hesitate just now? That night, Taiki couldn't sleep. He felt devoted to his senior Chinatsu, yet he also enjoyed his friendship with Hina and had recently felt some stirring emotions. Ayame's words had thrown him into confusion, and he began to wallow in self-pity. To distract himself from his troubles, Taiki decided to focus on training. Someone found Hina's bag left in the dorm, and Taiki recognized it. He took the bag and chased after the gymnastics team's bus. Hina thanked him when he handed over the bag. On his way back, he ran into the morning basketball practice. Chinatsu didn't even glance at him. After a morning of training, the athletes rushed to the cafeteria. The badminton team's dining area was chaotic like a battlefield, while the basketball team seemed much more harmonious. Chinatsu was chatting happily with Matsuoka, a handsome guy who easily draws envy. Kengo mentioned he liked Matsuoka for providing good equipment and being a skilled basketball player who took great care of his physique. Ayame was increasingly impressed, thinking such a person was worthy of her sister Chinatsu. Taiki felt uneasy. When he went to get his clothes, he bumped into Chinatsu and greeted her before trying to leave. But Chinatsu grabbed his sleeve, noticing a cut on his elbow. She took out a bandage, applied it herself, and wrote words of encouragement on it. Just then, Matsuoka called her over, and Chinatsu left Taiki behind. That evening, when the basketball and badminton teams met at the entrance, Taiki asked about Chinatsu and learned she had gone for extra practice alone as others couldn't keep up due to fatigue. Matsuoka approached Taiki, teasing him about being Chinatsu's little fanboy and saying that Chinatsu trains very hard. The captain mocked him, asking what he was pretending to be, her boyfriend. This comment hit close to home for Taiki, but Matsuoka was oblivious, unaware that he had hurt Taiki's feelings. It seems like everyone just sees Taiki's feelings as admiration rather than love. Taiki himself fell into deep thought and finally decided to look for senior Chinatsu because she hadn't come back. Hina couldn't find her anywhere and went to ask Kyo and the others, but no one knew where she was. While running, Taiki convinced himself that he was just worried about her running alone at night and that he would do the same if it were Hina. Thinking of Hina brought all sorts of thoughts to his mind again. He concluded that true liking should be felt more directly, and he realized that he now saw Hina as a girl. The various expressions of Hina that he had seen recently flashed through his mind, making him even more hesitant. Indeed, the longer he delayed responding to a confession, the harder it became to speak up. Just then, he saw a sign warning of bears in the area. Fearing for Chinatsu's safety, he hurriedly went to look for her. He admitted that his feelings for Chinatsu did include some admiration. Even though they lived under the same roof, he couldn't understand her thoughts. Perhaps admiration implies a sense of distance. However, he felt that it was precisely because of this admiration that he wanted to be by her side. While thinking this, Taiki heard Chinatsu's voice. She was carrying an elderly woman on her back. The woman had gone up the mountain to pick vegetables when her foot suddenly started hurting, and Chinatsu happened to pass by and carried her down. Chinatsu's kindness and gentleness touched Taiki again, and he couldn't help but smile brightly. They took the old lady home together. As a token of gratitude, she gave them some snacks and praised Taiki, calling him a good boyfriend. Taiki was startled and denied it vehemently, feeling his reaction was a bit too strong. It was no wonder the old lady misunderstood. She thought Taiki had come out looking for Chinatsu because he cared, but Taiki denied it, saying he was just out for a run. Afterwards, the elderly man drove them back to the hotel. On the way, Chinatsu didn't say a word. Her face, illuminated by the moonlight, was enough to make Taiki's heart skip a beat. After reporting the incident to their teacher, they each returned to their dorms. As soon as Taiki got back, he collapsed onto his bed. Kyo, seeing him like this, guessed what might have happened. During the next day's training, Ayame kept praising a player, making him grin from ear to ear. However, she still only had eyes for Yusa, occasionally comparing Taiki to Yusa. Then, a few girls from the gymnastics team came over. Hina was there just to glance at Taiki, which her friend quickly noticed. With the cultural festival incident, her friend had thought she and Taiki were already dating. Surprised by the lack of progress, her friend asked Hina if she knew about the rumor of the bonfire evening, where confessions made during the event lead to lasting relationships. It was a rare opportunity to ask Taiki for an answer to her confession. However, Hina refused, stating that she didn't need his answer until he genuinely liked her. Hina was sobbing on the roadside, and Ayame didn't know how to comfort her. Deep down, she blamed herself. If she hadn't tried to play matchmaker, Hina might not have been forced to respond tonight. Moreover, Ayame couldn't truly empathize with her. She could only lay out the tissues she carried, letting Hina pick any. Seeing Hina trying to smile through her tears and thank her made Ayame's tears flow as well. She hadn't realized Hina loved Taiki so deeply. Did Taiki know? Among those who confessed to Ayame, was there anyone who loved her as much? Almost without hesitation, Ayame concluded probably not. She envied such feelings. Unbeknownst to them, the training camp was about to end. Since that night, the atmosphere between Taiki and Hina had become awkward. They no longer spoke to each other. Taiki would head to the gym early alone to practice. He didn't regret rejecting Hina that night. Continuing as they were would only hurt her more. Meanwhile, Senior Kengo walked in, offering to play a match with Taiki. On the other side, Kyo found Ayame crouched in a corner, blaming herself. He asked what was wrong, but naturally, Ayame couldn't tell him. Yet, Kyo, with his high emotional intelligence, directly guessed it was about Taiki and Hina. Ayame's reaction confirmed it. She couldn't understand Taiki. Hina, such a wonderful girl, had confessed to him. What was he being so proud about? It would be different if he had no interest, but they got along so well as friends. Why couldn't they be in a relationship? Kyo thought the same, but saying so would definitely anger Hina. As Taiki's good friend, Kyo knew Taiki was the type to pursue actively. Being pursued was something he wasn't used to. Moreover, cherishing someone as a friend and as a lover are ultimately different. Either way, it was their matter, and outsiders couldn't interfere. The decision was up to Taiki alone. During his match with Senior Kengo, Taiki was thoroughly defeated. He was frustrated, realizing why Kengo hadn't played against him recently. Kengo had been improving secretly. Unfortunately, a short period of effort couldn't bridge the gap in their skills. After easily winning, Kengo stopped playing, but seeing Taiki's disappointed look, he shared his thoughts. Kengo admitted that recently, the thought of playing against Taiki scared him. He had never managed to beat senior Hyodo, and he even lost to first-year Yusa in a recent practice match. Losing to Taiki would shake his confidence further. Fortunately, on the last day of the training camp, he mustered the courage to face Taiki, believing it was more shameful to keep avoiding him. He spoke about facing fears of losing and shattering one's fragile pride, saying one must accept these feelings, chew them up, and assimilate them into one's being. This, Kengo hinted, was true strength, and his words resonated with Taiki beyond just badminton. Yet, despite this realization, Taiki still couldn't bring himself to greet Hina. Heading home, he ran into Chinatsu at the door. This time, Taiki gathered his courage and invited her to hang out on their next day off. Chinatsu pondered briefly before asking where they would go, a question Taiki hadn't considered. Struggling, he came up with an excuse to buy sports clothes, to which Chinatsu agreed and even suggested they visit a cafe together after shopping. They made plans, and that night, Taiki was too excited to sleep. It was a date, his first outing alone with a senior since their trips to the aquarium and the beach, presenting a perfect opportunity to impress and possibly confess his feelings. However, the memory of Hina crying bitterly that night instantly drained Taiki of his courage. To make up for it, and genuinely wanting to be friends with Hina, Ayami took her out shopping to distract her. They went to an arcade and enjoyed various games, which helped Hina gradually forget about her unsuccessful confession. Unexpectedly, they ran into one of Ayame's ex-boyfriends. His friend asked why they had broken up, and the ex accused Ayami of being too capricious, breaking up over a trivial issue. However, Ayami felt deceived by him. Initially, he seemed clumsy but nice, which led her to accept his dating request, only to find out later he was not as she thought. After retorting, Ayame quickly left with Hina, but the ex-boyfriend dared to call after her, criticizing her for not dating long enough and asking if she could not learn from her beautiful sister. Before Ayame could respond, Hina stepped in, accusing the ex of shifting the blame to Ayame just to save his own face. If the fault was his, neither the past affection nor the memories would hurt as much. Hina started to cry again, and Ayame hurriedly took her away, threatening the ex that if he showed up again, she'd expose his alt account. The next day at the gym, Hina saw Taiki and turned away. Taiki couldn't follow her, and even the badminton team's manager was becoming increasingly unfriendly toward him. Ayame told Taiki that Hina had cried that night. Taiki was aware, but felt he had to act that way. Now, he couldn't initiate a conversation with Hina. It was up to her to come to terms with the situation. Whether they could continue as good friends was also Hina's decision. Although Ayame knew Taiki was cherishing the friendship in his way, she still couldn't understand why he would reject such an outstanding girl. Was the person he liked really that charming? Unfortunately, before Taiki could answer, Ayame was called away. Back at the court, she ran into Kyo. Before Kyo could say anything, Ayame assumed he thought she was meddling too much, but that didn't matter to her. She couldn't stand seeing Hina upset. She gestured rudely at Kyo, who felt wronged but said nothing. Nevertheless, having someone so concerned about Hina was good. Hina's mood was still low. The hardest part was that she had to attend training despite feeling terrible, staying in the same place as Taiki and senior Chinatsu. Just thinking about it, seeing them, made it hard for her to breathe. That day, Taiki left as soon as training ended. Kengo casually remarked, wondering if Taiki was off to a date, then asked Kyo. Kyo didn't know either, but seeing how hurried Taiki was, he guessed it might be a meeting with senior Chinatsu. Taiki quickly reached the designated meeting place and found Chinatsu staring blankly at the sky, oblivious to the stares of those around her, just marveling at how fast the clouds were moving today.